Welcome to a joint meeting of the Winchester Select Board and the Winchester School Committee. My name is Rich Mucci. I'm chair of the Winchester Select Board. We're delighted to have our colleagues from the School Committee with us this evening. With me from the Select Board, before we turn it over to Chairman Hopcroft, is Vice Chair Anthea Brady, John Fallon, Michelle Pryor, and Michael Battencourt. And Tom, I don't know if you want to open your meeting and introduce everyone?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Tom Hopcroft. I'm the chair of the Winchester School Committee. I'd like to call our meeting to order as well. Present with us are our vice chair, Ms. Michelle Bergstrom, member Seamus Brady, member Chris Nixon, and about a minute away is our recording secretary, Karen Bolognese, who will be joining us in just a moment. We're looking forward to having a conversation about Lynch Solar and understanding whether we own it and generate revenue, whether we do a PPA and don't have to pay up front. So looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. I know you guys have back-to-back meetings, so we appreciate you being here tonight and your regular business tomorrow. We thought it would be great to get everyone together in one room. Here's the presentation all at once. I know some of our members might be hearing some of this information or seeing it for the first time, so this is beneficial. What I think we'll do, if it's okay with the school committee, is have the presentation and then open it up to questions. If everyone just wants to raise their hand, we can call on you and go from there. We got about 45 minutes, so we'll keep things moving. And who's going to start, Chris?
You want me to jump in? So thank you for having us, Rich. I want to recognize EFPBC Chair Jay Nardone is with me. Mark Scott is a joint appointee to the EFPBC from both the Select Board and the School Committee. He's officially our architect representative to the EFPBC, and Mark is the chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee. And what we have to run through you tonight, I appreciate Mike Bettencourt was with us at the last school committee meeting, so he will be able to anticipate each slide. This is almost verbatim what the school committee saw. It's a very quick overview. I'm going to go really fast through this. What's new tonight is obviously goal number 7 on that list, because we have some new information that's available to you guys. So the goal tonight is very quickly talk about the history of the solar scope and net zero energy goals on this project. Quickly look at the 2 procurement methods. We'd like to spend a couple of minutes talk about what the MSBA did and did not do in December. You all may remember there was a pretty significant vote on behalf of the executive board that was a favorable vote for us, but there may be some confusion about what that was and what the consequence was. And then just for some historical perspective, we have some information on the process and timing for PPAs that we did put into place at VO in the high school. And then we're going to get to the actual recommendation from the EFPBC that was made in April. Mark is actually going to speak to this about why it is that the EFPBC recommends to the school committee a PPA. And then we're going to talk about kind of the lanes that we travel in. So there's a role the school committee can take if it's a PPA. There's a role the select board can take if the preference is to go with direct ownership. So let me plow through this. So first and foremost, we're trying to really learn from our experience on the Vincent Owen project. In design on VO, there was certainly strong interest in having solar on the building, but we didn't really have design criteria at the time. We were actively looking for it, but it just sort of wasn't there. So our structural engineer for VO made the sort of executive decision to increase the dead load allowances on the classroom wing, which we could do for a fairly modest cost. But our long span spaces at VO that are more complex structurally and more expensive. So we're talking about the gymnasium, the cafeteria. Those spaces were not upgraded to hold any additional dead load. So then, of course, years later, when we had the opportunity to put solar on VO, we were a little bit limited in where we could place it. We have it, but not as much as we could have. So we've learned from that. EFPBC unanimously, I think, Mark, voted to increase the dead load allowance on the project so we can load the entire roof. That's some of what you see in that energy model there. Between the investment in the structure, excavation and conduits for ground-mounted solar, as well as about 5,000 feet of solar that we actually do own in this project, regardless of whether we talk about direct ownership for the balance or a PPA. To achieve some lead points that are really important to us, we actually do own about 5,000 square feet. And Mark, do you mind just pointing to that real quick in that image on the right? So we have a third floor outdoor classroom on this building, and to provide cover for those kids, that whole structure is going to be loaded with solar. So that's also in the project. And so all along the way, this is about an integrated design and planning process We have Andelman and Lalick is our energy sustainability consultant, and they've been updating their energy model. This kind of tells us what the energy demand would be for Lynch, and then on the flip side of that, to get to net zero, you have to balance that demand with production. So Zapotec is a sub-consultant to Tappe Architects, and they are the ones who've actually been kind of developing the conceptual design for these systems. So as I said, there's two different methods. A PPA, or power purchase agreement, requires no upfront costs, and then the payback is discounted utility bills. Typically, these are amortized over 20 years. A PPA is basically a lease agreement that the school committee has with this third-party provider. So in the case of VO in the high school, we said we agree to lease the roof of our building. And in exchange, the town, of course, is getting a discounted electrical rate. We realize, although the district has not had utility bills for years, we used to, the bills come to the town, and schools have a significant, if not majority share, in those costs. So then there's the direct ownership model, which is there is no third-party provider. So we just pay for the system outright. So that's a significant upfront cost, but the benefit is the generation can go right towards powering the building. So much larger upfront cost, but you've got larger savings on the utility side, bigger year-over-year impact. Okay, let's just talk about what the board did in December. You may remember at fall town meeting, I shared that the MSBA had taken sort of an unprecedented step in suspending the green repair program. That's the program that covers roof replacement, window replacement, boiler replacement, and that kind of thing for schools in really urgent need in Massachusetts. They suspended that program. It effectively unencumbered $76 million that they had set aside for that. And they did that out of concern for escalation in construction costs. They've been hearing not only from our Beacon Hill delegation that has that concern, both for Winchester and the other towns that they represent, but other towns throughout the Commonwealth. There was a question from Mr. Galvin on the floor of Fall Town meeting. You may remember he asked, are we going to see that $76 million? And we were hopeful, but we weren't sure. And sure enough, on December 21st, the MSBA voted to increase the construction cost cap per square foot, for which they will consider reimbursement. What that means is, for a town like Winchester, we have a 36.21% reimbursement rate. Is Meg behind me to confirm? I think that's right, something like that. That 36.21% reimbursement rate is not a percentage of the actual cost per square foot that it's going to take to build Lynch, because Lynch is going to cost a lot per square foot. That 36.21% is applied to a cap that the MSBA sets, and they revise, I think, every couple of years, 2 or 3 years. So they effectively they redefined, if you will, what that limit was. And so in raising that, and I think they raised it by $30 or $40 a square foot, we get 36.21% of that as reimbursement. So what's important to note, and there's a more detailed explanation, if you go to the project website, lynch2025.com, if you click on the cost page, this is our January 23 update. The only thing that changed as a consequence of their vote was an increase in the total project grant, and therefore a decrease in our net project cost. What's hard maybe for some people to sort of understand is that they did not increase the project budget. They did not give us $3 million more. It just means that if we spend every nickel, including of the contingencies, we may have to bond up to $2.9 million less, which is a good thing. And we were all happy about that. But they didn't say, here's $3 million, find what to spend it on. So that's an important sort of clarification. With respect to timing and our history, for Vincent Owen, the school committee approved a PPA on October 2nd of 18. And then by fall town meeting, the select board had a pilot agreement on the warrant. Well, let me explain that. So the school committee approves the power purchase agreements, but the instrument, if you will, that provides for the compensation back to the town does come from the select board in the form of payment in lieu of taxes. And that's typically put forward by the select board for town meeting. So that happened rather quickly. For Winchester High School, where we were dealing with some roof issues on the building and equipment that was in the way, and we were managing fall protection, it took a little longer. You see there, we approved that PPA in December of 18, and then by the spring, the select board had that pilot agreement ready for town meeting. So there's a quick sort of review of some of the investments we've made, MSBA decision-making, and what the options are, but I'd love to turn it over to Mark, if you want to grab that mic, and you can talk a little bit about why it is the EFPBC has made this recommendation.
Sure. And when the EFPBC made the recommendation, we hadn't gotten a complete picture of the finances from Zapotec. But independent of the finances, our decision-making process was focused primarily on two things: certainty and speed. The more that the design team knows about what is in the project and how it's being delivered, the more effective they are at conveying that through the documents and specifications. So the better the work is that our design team does on the project. So having a decision sooner gives them more time to complete the work that they need to do for the project. The second piece is speed. And based on past projects, Vincent Owen and the high school, we knew that the process of obtaining a PPA could be relatively quick. And the pathway to get to direct financing of a solar system on the building and on the site was a little less clear to us. So that made us concerned about the certainty side of things. So ultimately, we voted to support a PPA because it was proven, and we knew that there would be a net benefit to the town financially, though we anticipated at the time that maybe the net benefit would be smaller than under a direct ownership model. We just didn't understand how the process for getting to direct ownership would get us to the place we wanted to be in time. I think that's it.
Okay. So after some conversations with Beth, I think actually today we wanted to add this too. So we've been kicking around this idea with at the EFPBC table around a decision by midsummer. This is what EFPBC has been asking, or excuse me, TAPE Architects have been asking for. So we wanted to make that a little more real for everybody, and what does that mean? So there is an important 90% submission to the MSBA in August. That's based on a package that the design team is putting together in July. That goes to 2 cost estimators and peer review. And so to get that ready in time, TAPE is asking for a June decision if it's direct ownership, because their team has a lot of work to do. The goal would be to actually roll that into the documents. By the way, this is predicated on the idea of, yes, we want to direct own it. We think we figure out how we're going to pay for it, but we want to Mark's point, integrate it into the project. We don't want gaps in scope, and we don't want overlap in scope. Where you have overlap in scope, you've got, bids can come in higher than they need to, and you'll never get $1 back for those. So this is why our design team is asking for a June decision. For a PPA, the sooner the better, but certainly by the end of June for the very reasons that Mark just described. There is a pathway, and Meg White, behind me, is the one who's kind of managed this process for both VO and the high school. While there is a process to procure a PPA, it's something that the town does have experience with. And while that will still take some time to get there and to bring something to the school committee for approval, if that's the path we take, just knowing that that's kind of the collective decision would be really important for the design and management team to kind of begin planning for that. So then this was a point that we were making to the school committee at our last meeting that I want to be clear about here as well. This is a unique situation. Like for the school committee, it's not really a choice between this or that, meaning it shouldn't be a choice between a PPA or direct ownership, because really direct ownership is kind of a decision for select board to make with management input. A school committee can say yes to a PPA. If the school committee supports a power purchase agreement, it doesn't preclude direct purchase. It's simply a signal from the school committee. Number one, we support solar. Number two, we're happy to make our roof available and the site available for it. And we would appreciate the discount on the electrical bill that comes to the town. I think that's an important signal to send. Remember, there's 2 pathways. And do they both have green lights? Do they both have red lights? If they both have red lights, we're not making any progress at all. So we're just trying to be clear sort of about the lanes here, because it is an important conversation to have around direct ownership. But that's something, and I'm not speaking for the school committee, but for me personally, as I shared at the last meeting, I feel like that's really an important conversation for you all to have with the town manager and perhaps even input from the finance committee. So with respect to the financial analysis, again, to recap, PPA, basically $0 upfront cost, but some measurable, significant, utility discount over time. We put this together before we got that final update from Zapotec this afternoon, but, rough numbers, it's a $3 million project cost upfront. Then you've got the bonding cost, but you do have significant savings in energy. So there's two paths. If both the school committee and the select board support both, that's not a bad problem to have, because that's two solid ways to get there. But if there is strong interest in direct ownership, then of course a question comes, well, where's the money come from? And also, how much money do we need? What's that impact? So that might be a good segue, Rich, if it's okay with you and Beth, just to share that we had a really helpful meeting with management last week. I think it was Wednesday. And from Mr. Toogood, worked with Hilltop, we got 4 different bonding scenarios, and it was recommended that we look at the 15-year level debt option at 4%. That's a 3.5% band to start off with. Total interest cost, $1,152,600. So we got these tables Thursday from management. We shared them with our architect in Zapotec. They were on this Friday and on the weekend. There were, I think, 2 versions of that report that came out this afternoon, so we apologize for that. Zapotec kind of has a financial modeling tool. I have to assume it's not as sophisticated as Hilltop's. I think it was actually the ban interest that probably threw it off. But if you look at their revised report on page 7, the bottom third of the chart, and for the school committee's benefit, the top third of the chart shows the cost with payback year for direct ownership as if there was no borrowing. So this, if we literally had $3 million sitting on the table with nothing else to spend it on. So the school committee saw this at our last meeting. The middle of the chart shows the PPA analysis, and it's what's at the bottom that's new. So in this instance, this actually now includes the cost of interest. If you add up the interest for both the roof-mounted and the canopies, that comes close to Hilltop's 115. It's not quite, and this is that discrepancy we just wanted to point out. It's really just a function of how the solar consultant uses their tool. And I wish they lined up exactly, but they don't. But I think it's understood from our conversations with Beth today, we should certainly assume the Hilltop numbers are the numbers to go with. And then the last thing I might just say quickly, Jay, because I know there was a question about this, the chart refers to something called option C. Mark, can you just take a moment and describe to these guys why it's C and what A, B, and D are and where that comes from?
Sure. So we always had PV across the entire roof of the building, but we had four different options for configurations of photovoltaic on the site over the parking area. And option C just happened to be the one we thought was most appropriate to this site. And so that's just sort of lingered on in Zapotec's language, but the site is the canopy array, and in the gray line, the roof is the roof that is consistent across all the options.
And then for the school committee's benefit, we did take out of this chart the 3rd floor outdoor classroom solar, because as was noted, that's something we basically own in this project already. So we're doing that. That's about 5,000 square feet. So we took that out of this because really this analysis is all about how do you do the rest of it. So how do we get to net zero, meaning how do we procure roof-mounted and ground-mounted that's going to match the demands of the building? The roof is going to give us up between 61 and 62% of the energy we need. We find the rest of it on the ground with ground-mounted canopies. And in an option that's called option C, just because that's what we called it. So don't want people to think there's other options out there that we want to throw out, and I apologize for confusion on that. How did I do on time? Perfect. We're done.
Okay. Jay or Ken, do you have anything to add, or?
I appreciate everyone coming and getting so involved in this. We pushed for the PPA because it's the best track, like Mark said, to keep it going. If the money was available, we'd love to own it. It's just, another stretching out without, and it doesn't really look by financial to take a loan out to purchase this, where PPA is doing it for us as a lease.
I just had one thing that I'm not sure is correct, but I want to be sure, just to preface it. PPA versus purchase irrelevant from the standpoint of sustainability. The building will be net zero one way or the other. This is just, I think, strictly a financial decision for the town. Looking at the numbers on page 7 from the Zapatec study, it lists the conceptual and project costs before the investment tax credit. The investment tax credit is now available to municipalities. It wasn't until August of last year. That would be a 30% rebate to the town after the system is completely constructed, installed, and operating. So, if, based on these conceptual numbers, that would return about $725,000 to the town. If the total savings listed here on both the first 3 rows and then the last 3 don't include that $725,000, it would change the numbers a little bit. Not drastically, but it would speed up the payback and it would create a greater total savings after 25 years. I don't think it, in my mind, really changes the calculus about whether the town should do PPA versus purchase. The same, there's the same impact that the town gets a little bit more money with a direct purchase, but has to come up with the money up front. Whereas the PPA is a little bit less lucrative to the town, and there's no upfront cost incurred because the solar developer pays all the costs up front. But I just want to make sure, if I'm reading this correctly, these numbers are a little more pessimistic than I think the reality would be once the town gets the 30% rebate. And part of the reason I bring that up is for this project, but also as we look ahead to other projects in the future. I think because of this new investment tax credit provision of direct pay for municipalities, the pot has been sweetened a little bit, and I just want to make sure that's, incorporated.
So Ken, we did question that, and they said the final number takes that into account. They just listed out in case.
Oh, okay.
So you know what the number you're expecting back as the credit. So
Okay, so the
that was brought
ITC
up with them that
So the ITC is in the final savings?
is.
Okay, right,
they're
good.
listing that out separately, just so we,
Yep.
expecting to get that credit back.
Okay,
So
great.
the total savings after 25 years includes that 30%?
That's what they said
Okay.
on the call.
All right, great.
And one of the things we did talk about at the last school committee meeting, and not only Mike was there, but Ken was there as well. If there is really strong interest in direct purchasing solar, which would be a departure from what we've done in the past, but could be an important and exciting pivot, this is not the last opportunity to do it. We have a tremendous amount of square footage of roofs in this town. Much of it's with school buildings. So we were reminding the school committee, you all are very familiar with the whole conversation we've just had back in January and February about our capital needs. So we're going to need to replace the roof at Ambrose in the next 2 or 3 years. Susan McPhee came to the school committee in the spring of 18 and asked if we would support a power purchase agreement for Ambrose. But we got into a conversation about the age of the roof, and that came back to the town, and it was determined that there was no way a PPA made sense at Ambrose because we'd have to replace the roof long before the provider could, realize their return on investment. So that was a shame, but what was really clear to me at the time was strong interest in getting solar on the roof at Ambrose. So the question that I threw out to the school committee, a couple of weeks ago was, we will need to replace the roof at Ambrose. Is there going to be solar on the roof at Ambrose? I hope there will be. How will we do that? That could be a PPA, could also be direct ownership. So the school committee, I know that we voted, but it seemed like we had consent, was to talk this summer about a capital request for $40,000 to bring the structural engineer back on board to review the calculations for the roof loading in Ambrose, and to hire someone like a Zapotec to do a conceptual model for Ambrose, so that we could then bring that to you guys in management and say, what do you want to do? And then, of course, there's Morocco Ridge, too.
We're running out of time, Chris, so I appreciate you
Yeah.
divulging a little bit into Ambrose. But at this point, I would ask if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand. I'll recognize you. And go from there, John.
Just a few, under PPA, does the vendor own the maintenance and responsibility? Because I know some of my clients have bought them, the rectifiers fail, we end up in lawsuits and performance bonds. And then what type of discount would the town receive on the utility rate? If it's 12 cents a kilowatt hour, do we get a 4 cents? Is that guaranteed in perpetuity, or how does that whole thing work so we can understand what that
I
is?
think
The first part on
The first part is it's their system, so they own the maintenance on that. And you do get into issues like if the roof had to be worked on, then it comes back on, there's all language about us having to hire them to take panels off, lost revenue while the panels are off. That's giant what you're referring to.
And then the discount on power, we rely a lot on advice of Zapotec in terms of what they're seeing in the marketplace, but I almost feel like that might be something Meg White could speak to, because that ultimately gets locked into the contract. The school committee is not going to sign a PPA that the town manager and select board, or certainly select board chair, haven't seen and are okay with. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah.
This financial analysis is based on a 15% discount, which Zapotec felt was reasonable for the sake of this analysis, but would be negotiated.
Thank you.
And some of the things that we do own, John, in the project, as much to just avoid the prospect of, let's say, being 80% complete with a parking lot and the landscaping, and then somebody comes in and tears it up to put in conduit. So we're owning excavation conduit across the site to where the ground-mounted canopies would be. That makes sense, but that also, because we own it, that means the solar provider doesn't have to pick it up. So there's some things that we can do on the project budget side to kind of make that more attractive.
Do they post a bond, so, like a performance bond, that they're going to actually finish the job and not go?
I presume they post a performance bond, but I don't know. That Meg might know that. Do you know?
It's been like quite a few years since we negotiated the last one, so I don't remember, but we can find that out.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd like to know, for sure.
On a PPA, if that's the question, I don't think they do. They have a multi-million-dollar investment at stake, that the only way they make their money back is if it produces solar power. So I think that's sufficient, incentive for them to.
It might be, but if they go bankrupt, then it doesn't make a
Oh,
difference
well,
about
that's-
that.
yeah,
So that's
they
why you
would-
get the performance bond, so you want the surety to complete the job, and we want that. So if that's something I'd like to have in place. I know it's not your responsibility, but.
Mhm.
Other questions? Sure.
Yeah, I've got two. On page 4, and I don't know if this goes to what you were saying, Mark, around time. If we own, the outputs are interconnected behind the main building. If third-party owns, we're connecting it in front of the main building. Does that impact design? Front of the building, back of the building, having it in different places?
It does, that's a matter of how they're monitoring the metering, but
Okay.
the design has to be done either way.
Yep.
But basically, if we go to PPA, they're taking electricity before it ever got to the school, their own meters and everything. If we go the other route of direct owning it, it goes through the same transformer and the meter for the school.
And
Sounds like a lot, but it's all done.
Seamlessly.
With the exception of, again, that 5,000 square foot array
Right.
up on the third floor, that's behind the meter. So we're getting the full benefit of that.
Yep. So, thank you. So my other question's around annual cost. So, agreed that if we own, we have to maintain, if the third party owns, they have to maintain. We have a debt service cost of $105,000 a year. What's the anticipated utility cost if we're doing a TPA?
So the PPA,
So what's the bill for the energy
so
that we're getting at the 15% discount?
So what's the 85% cost?
Sure. But what's that cost?
Yeah, we just have to do that math.
That's what we've been asking that, they just don't know that yet.
Well, in other words, we have the
model has to
discount.
be out. We have
Yeah.
a discount, but we don't know until the energy model is complete
Right.
as to what the electric
the exact
consumption
cost
would be,
is, yeah.
to tell you what we'd be saving.
And does that fluctuate in market fluctuation of electricity costs?
You took my question.
Yeah.
I would think, I'm just like ballpark, if we have to decide by June, if it's, $100,000 in bond plus X for maintenance versus $200,000 in utility with zero maintenance, like do you think we can get a guess at that number
Well,
before we take a vote?
related to that, Michelle, Zapotec, and again, I only follow this if it's newsworthy and it's reported, but if there are some, I guess, regulation or statute around changes in utility rates. There's a process and procedure for that. Zapotec took some of that into account. So over the life, how many rate increases would there historically be? What are they limited to? So the escalation and the cost of power, if you will, they took that into account. Andelman and Lalick has just updated their design development energy model. And the district, so our superintendent and our operations director have just looked at it last week. They're looking just to confirm things like hours of operation and summer use and so forth. So, I mean, it's virtually at the finish line. So I think we could follow up with you for sure.
John?
I have a couple questions. Is the discount negotiable? It's 15%, can we negotiate that up? And is there an opportunity to buy the vendor out?
Yes.
We own it at the end of the PPA, do we not?
Well, let's say,
Short term, 5-year buyout or something like that, that's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
negotiations.
Typically
Yeah.
7 years, but, yeah.
Yeah.
You
because,
have the option to buy it before the 20 years.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah,
and
it's
we
like
have
a
that
lease to own.
option currently right now with the high school, the DPW, and the VO, which are the 3 current PPAs that we have right now.
so they're closing the energy plant in Everett, and they might close the LNG plant, terminal in Everett. So while there may be a cost cap on electricity, there may not be.
Mhm.
And so, might be, the economics make sense for us to buy it after 5 years. That's where was the genesis of my question.
You also asked about whether we could negotiate up the PPA
Mhm.
savings, and this, Zapotec just assumed a 15% rate, but we could, obviously, either this could go out through an RFP, and we could, pick the provider with the best rate, or we could go with another solar provider that we have direct access to and see what they're willing to do, but that's just an estimated.
So again, that brings up a good point. Does this, because this is a public procurement, does this have to go to an RFP?
It doesn't have to.
So this is what, subject to Chapter 30B?
The issue is that we're a member of a nonprofit energy consortium called Power Options.
Yep.
And they have a solar provider that we don't have to, but we can access directly and work with directly and not have to put this out to bid under 30B.
Thank you.
And we use them on VO in the high school.
Can I follow up on John real quickly
Go ahead,
before we
Michelle.
move on to something else? If we buy out a PPA after 5 years, do we lose the ITC incentives?
Do we lose the what, Michelle?
ITC incentives.
Just keep it up
Thank you.
front the first year.
Yeah, we certainly
They've
wouldn't be
already-
able to
that's
get.
there.
So we wouldn't get that 30,
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I wonder if we'd, be able to buy out the system for a lower cost, because it was originally purchased at a lower cost,
Depreciated,
but I'm
right?
not sure.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And the buyout rate would probably be set in the PPA, I assume, the
Yeah.
cost of the buyout.
So you'd have to see if it balanced out the cost of 30% upfront.
Right. Well, you'd essentially decide, is it going forward, starting at year 5, year 7, year 10, whatever
Right.
it would be, is this a good deal to stick with the PPA versus buy it out at that point?
Cynthia's next.
I was just making sure she went next, so.
So I have a clarifying question from up front in the slides where you said, actually, it was there, the timing. Wasn't as upfront as I
Right there?
thought. No, the timing for making a decision. So, just for clarification, the PPA, would be the end of June, and it does not require going into this 90% package, and it doesn't require going into the 90% package in July?
Well, that's right, because we can be clearer about what our scope includes, and if we are, for instance, if we're gonna put together an RFP, we can be clear in the RFP, this is the Lynch project, this is what's included in the base project, so the other party has an idea about, like, where we shall meet. That's really the way I would describe it. But if it's direct ownership, there's a lot of just design and engineering that now has to be performed and be included into the package. As well as there's a procedural issue with the MSBA. I can't imagine they would be an obstacle to this, but it would actually require a revised project scope and budget agreement as well.
Okay, I was just wanted to make sure my understanding on that was correct. And then, in terms of the maintenance with purchase, is there any estimate of what the maintenance cost? I'm making the assumption that we would probably need a contractor or somebody with expertise in solar panels to do that work. So do we have an understanding or estimate of what maintenance costs would be if it was purchased? And is that also, if we do, is that built into these estimates?
I believe,
There's really no maintenance unless there's an issue.
It's a,
And
So
that's a
what-
warranty, and there's 10-year, mostly 10 to 15-year warranty on different parts.
So the understanding is that there would be within 10 or 15 years, no costs in maintenance?
That we're not covered by a warranty. The only thing you can really do, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, is wash them. And Mother Nature usually takes care of that even in the bad pollen, so.
Yeah, I haven't seen a maintenance contract for solar, and it might be unusual, but just in case, I asked a colleague in Amoresco, which is one of the bigger solar developers, and he said, if you did want to get a maintenance contract for a system size roughly the same as ours, he predicted it would be somewhere in the $5,000 to $7,500 range per year. You can also roll the dice to some extent, as Jay was just saying. You can go for 10 years, and pretty unlikely you'll need any maintenance. So why are you paying for that up front? But then you're covered. If you had to, if a bunch of inverters failed after 10 years or something like that, that can be significant. So you might want to just proactively have some kind of maintenance contract.
Just like crystal ball wise, right? In terms of if they were owned, do we have a lifespan estimate? And then sort of where the crystal ball comes in is, technology is sort of constantly evolving as well. So is there, within kind of providers of solar, is there an idea of how long before, a system is obsolete, or there's a significantly improved option that, if it was being leased, becomes far easier to shift to?
I'd love to answer that with my capital planning hat on. We would have to replace a roof before we'd have to replace the full system.
Okay.
Because if you're 20 or 20, well, Ambrose is 18 years old, the roof. And we're talking about it now because we don't want to be talking about it after it's already 20 years old. We had buckets at Lynch when I got on the school committee catching the water coming through the ceiling. So we don't want to repeat that. The roof will fail first. These systems can lose some efficiency over time.
They lose the ROIs, they push out at 20 years, because after that, they feel they're starting to lose their efficiency after 20 years.
And the folks that Ken just mentioned, I think, was it Amoresco that came in on our call in August? So Ken helpfully brought in some folks, and we talked around that notion of, okay, so what if you had a PPA and year 19, year 20, you're going to need to replace a roof. What do you do with the array that's on there? You can actually roll in the cost of removing that array and putting in the new one. You can roll that cost into just the financing of the new PPA. So there's a way to kind of, at the end of the day, you're paying for it, right? It all gets monetized in your discount on electricity, but that is one way to deal with it.
Chris, has Carlisle or Firestone or any of the roof manufacturers looked at this and said, because it's covered with panels, if you buy a 25-year roof, it's actually going to last 30 years? Because it's protected from the elements by and large.
So I don't know what Firestone or any of those guys, or Carlisle or anybody's doing. I don't know if Mark, if you've had any insight into that. There's two ways to actually mount these. You can do a mechanically fastened system, so you're directly sort of bolting to the structure, which is necessary for wind load, for instance, but you can also have a ballasted system. Ballasted systems are simpler, but they're heavier. And that's one of the reasons why the EFPBC was supportive to just increase the dead load capacity. I can't tell you what's going on in the roofing industry around warranties, to be honest with you.
They do, however, every manufacturer has a warranty procedure for putting solar on a roof that you have to follow,
Right.
or avoid their warranty for the installation.
Yeah, I think we dealt with that, actually, I think Meg had to deal with that for VO, right?
Yeah, all three roofs.
Yeah.
Other questions, James?
Thank you. I think Michelle took my first question and Anthea took my second one, so pace to go last here. I think I just want to emphasize John's point. I think for me, the real variable that's tricky here is what's the electricity going to be worth 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now? I don't think any of us can predict that or would be very, very wealthy indeed. So I think it's just trying to think about what that might look like, what that could look like. And I think for me, that's really important because that's a really potentially large variable looking over the last 20, 30 years across all utilities. You know, I don't think anyone can say with any confidence that they can predict it will be X or Y. So it's just something I think we all need to consider.
We need a utility futurist.
Crystal ball. Other questions?
So Jay, in the past, we've gone with a PPA because there really seemed to be no other option.
And there was no investment tax credit.
So
Which is
that's,
huge.
right, so,
That's
and there was no investment tax credit. So
So it never
we're
made sense.
looking at this now because the marketplace has changed, is that correct?
Yeah.
What do you see happening in the marketplace? Are people generally still moving forward with PPAs, or are more municipalities and businesses moving forward with ownership?
If you have the money right now, debt-free, you buy it.
No question.
And that's what this tells you, is you save a lot of money if you buy it now and you have cash in your pocket.
Right.
It gets much more complicated if you have to finance it, especially now because interest rates are particularly high.
Right.
But so, because of the investment tax credit, the ability to take that 30% discount, that makes it viable for municipalities to pursue direct ownership. And that's only, recent. So really, no projects in town would have qualified until this one.
Until this one. And to follow up on that, to Seamus's point, there are a lot of assumptions that have gone into
Absolutely.
these numbers that are uncertain because this is also new to everyone. But I guess I'm wondering about some of the assumptions around the energy costs and the bonding rate. So for example, John asked if we could buy the PPA out. What if we could pay off our bonds sooner? Like, things like that, would that make it more viable for us to go to direct ownership too?
It's a lot of numbers.
It's a lot of, and it's a lot of assumptions. It's a
And we
big,
don't even have, you'd like to look at another school, we don't have an electric school.
right,
So we have nothing to compare to what the energy consumption is right now. It's a brand-new school, brand new model. We're relying on the professionals to give us a model
right.
we can work with.
Because we all seem to agree that we want a net zero school. We all know that it's gonna be solar. We all know that solar is gonna get us to net zero. So basically, it's, do we wanna make the leap to a direct ownership that might actually be a revenue-generating source for the town? Or do we wanna sort of go the safer route with a PPA?
Yep,
Is
that's
that-
exactly it.
And the word on Capitol Hill is that the Inflation Reduction Act and possibly even the tax credit are items that some folks want to see up for debate on our debt limit conversations. And so, there's so many things that could be in the air. I hope that doesn't disappear. But that just kind of speaks to, the variability of some stuff that's in play right now.
Right.
Chris, you mentioned in your presentation that we can always start out with a PPA and then switch. When is the drop dead date to switch by? Is it that June date, or is it later back to that?
Yeah, so, I think, again, speaking personally, I think it's helpful for the school committee to say, we're committed to solar on the project, we're willing to lease out our roof and our grounds, we would support a PPA, understanding it doesn't preclude direct ownership. That effectively greenlights one path. If the select board with management's input, feels like direct ownership is the way to go, again, Rich, it's just a massive amount of work. There is a 90% package coming out at the end of July. So really, towards the end of June is really what we're looking at for direct ownership, because that needs to be fully captured in the documents, or we're gonna be in a world of hurt. That's just the only one. I don't know if there's a cleaner way to say it.
No, there isn't, especially, the workforce out there and the architects that are behind the gun on it. So,
Yeah.
What's the
flexibility, because obviously if the board decided we wanted direct ownership, we would
Say that
be,
again, Beth?
if the board decided we wanted to go the direct ownership route, we would still have to go to town meeting with a borrowing authorization. So if we got to town meeting and, you know, could we pivot at that point, or is that too late? If we had to, you know, town meeting didn't approve
We're going
an
out to bid in
article.
September, right?
At that point, it would have to be incorporated through a change order, which is never a good idea with something this large, because it would be very expensive.
I mean, at some point, we've had this conversation with the design team. At some point, it can get so late in the timeline that there are some folks on the project team who would say, it's time to just let this go. Let this not be a part of the Lynch replacement project that we're doing now with TAPE and the MSBA. Let this be its own standalone project. Come back later and do it. Later could mean a year after it's opened. Who knows? I mean, we got to operate the building. The energy model is very helpful, but we have to operate that building for a year through all 4 seasons in the school year before we can really say this is how much power we're actually using, and then we'll know with confidence how much we need to generate. Right now, everything else is just modeled. But that is another potential, which is you just do it later. But that's, I mean, not something I personally am excited about and support. I mean, the entire EFPBC wants to get this done. We want to get solar on the building when it opens.
But the solar is going in the same place, no matter what. So even if we go forward with direct ownership, a PPA could pick that up.
Right, but the PPA could also come in and try to design their own system that was more economical to them at that point, rather than us controlling what we wanted the canopies and where.
And we'd certainly want to avoid work in an occupied building and on an occupied site. The preference would be to get it done before we're occupying the building.
If we waited, and there was funds left in the project, we didn't use all the contingencies for some reason, could we then switch to a direct?
That's, I think, another conversation with the MSBA, because that would still require a project scope and budget agreement change, which, and we've talked through this with our OPM, that if the decision was made in June to go with direct ownership, they did reach out to the MSBA, they would want to actually change all these documents and have votes on it at the bid date in the fall, which would be pretty late, but there's a way to do it. I can't speak to what their appetite would be to support that at the end of the project.
Can I?
Just real quick.
So I know that MSBA is typically pretty stringent. Have there been any discussions that, given that this changed kind of mid our project moving, given that the Inflation Reduction Act sort of changed this incentive mid our project moving forward, do you know if there's been sort of discussions around whether this type of change to ownership could fit into an existing budget? Kind of just to tag on to Rich's question, if there's budget left over, but also if, given that this is like a pretty significant change in what a municipality can and can't do, how that fits in.
So that's a great question, and that sort of goes back, Ken, to some of those conversations we were having at the subcommittee level shortly after, maybe that was early fall, late summer. We were having conversations around geothermal as a scenario for Lynch. Our understanding from conversations the OPM has had with the MSBA would be no, that there's not a way to account for the investment tax credit within sort of the construct of project financing. It's very black and white with them.
Yes, I'll be super fast. Thank you guys, and it's great that we have been moving through these projects over the years, and now we have a sustainability director to lead us through some of this, and sustainability committee is part of the project, it seems like the exercise on the select board side is decided to see if we should see if there's money out there to do this, and whether it's going to be worthwhile for us to do it. Certainly, even using ARPA funds to pay down some of the debt on this initially might be a good idea. Having the federal tax credits is great. It could be that our discussion with the finance committee, is helpful to us as well. So, a lot more questions than answers. I know we just all got this. These numbers, an hour ago or so. So it's a lot to digest. I don't know if we're going to schedule a next meeting, maybe we show up at the school committee meeting instead, seeing as they were nice enough to come here and kind of see what information we have then and provide questions through the town manager or the project manager. I'm not sure what the next step is for us, but seems like we could talk for another couple hours on this.
So I think we're out of time for tonight.
Yep.
But I think, Tom, you're gonna continue this conversation tomorrow, it sounds like.
Yeah, so we'll continue this on our agenda, our meeting tomorrow, but we really want to work with you guys because, you know, as was noted, you know, a lot of this is up to, you know, what the town's appetite is. You know, we talk about there's not a lot of certainty in a lot of these things. The only thing there's certainty of is, you know, if we own the thing, we have free energy. You know, so it's something to look at. But we don't have the money for it, so it comes down to you guys, I think, in large part. So, you know, we'd love to continue the conversation and figure out how we can be supportive and partner with you, whichever way we end up going on this.
We appreciate that.
Can we ask if you guys have other questions? We have yours, Ms. Pryor, but if others have direct questions that you think of later, you can send them to Jay, and we'll figure out whether that's a, you know, Andelman and Lalick answer, or if it's a Zapotec answer, and we'll do our best to keep plowing through those.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
School committee's adjourned. You guys can keep going.
Keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're.
Thank you, Patty.
What are we doing now here? What's up? Oh, right. Jeez.
Just give us a moment while we reset here.
That's cool, thank you, I will.
Your knees are a little bit.
Spread out a little bit.
Works.
All right, we're going to continue on with our meeting. I know we're running a little behind. I appreciate everyone's patience. We're going to start with our public hearing this evening, which is on temporary parking restrictions near the Shannon Beach area. So the way this will work is I'll have a presentation, I believe, Beth, Chief, are you here for this?
Yes.
You want to come up?
Yeah.
Sergeant Batchelor, you come on.
Safety officer, Frank Batchelor also.
Come on up. So what we'll do is we'll have a presentation by staff, then I'll open it up to the public for comment. We'll go there. When I open it up for public comment, I just ask that you be limited to 3 minutes. I know we have a lot of people here. If someone's made the point that you were going to make, I just ask maybe that you have a spokesman or spokeswoman for that comment, just to keep things moving. We've received some comments written. We appreciate those in advance. Thank you very much for that. So with that, Beth, I'll certainly.
Sure,
it
thank
up to
you.
you.
So I'll just kick it off very briefly, and then I'll turn over to the chief. As we all know, Shannon Beach, which is a DCR-owned facility located off of Mystic Valley Parkway, has become a very popular destination over the past few years. And as a result, we've seen some overflow parking into our neighborhoods. DCR is working this year to try to do a little bit of crowd control, I think is probably the best way to describe it. They have a new bathhouse structure. They have done some restriping in their parking lot, their main lot off of Mystic Valley Parkway. And they are planning to implement, if they haven't already, a gate. So they'll have the parking lot will be closed basically dusk till dawn. But they've also at the same time closed off some of the overflow parking that they previously had on Mystic Valley Parkway. And so I know last year the police department worked with some of the folks in the Lakeview Road neighborhood and Ravenscoff Road to try to mitigate some of the parking that you all were seeing during the summer, busiest times. So I'll turn it over to you guys if you want to just kind of outline what you had done last year and maybe what you see happening this year. And then I think really this is a conversation for us to hear from the neighbors, kind of what your thoughts are.
So last year, we had a number of different complaints. We had a lot of overflow from the shutdown of the Revere Beach location. So what we did was we did a temporary police no parking with some barricades up at Lakeview on both sides, Ravenscroft. I believe that was it, right, Frank?
Yes.
It seemed to cut down a little bit, but, that was a temporary thing that I did. More than willing to do it again this year to try to cut down on some of the overflow parking, especially with them shutting down that second parking lot. I think we're gonna have a lot of overflow that's gonna be coming into our side streets. I know Medford has been doing the blockades, although they're private roads also too, which is a little bit different. But I know I have had people from Ginn Road that have also inquired about doing something similar to what we did last year.
Sergeant Batchelor, anything to add?
It was during that time, along with the chief, that we had the emergency no parking as well as some signs for the residents as well that they could park in that area. And to go along with the chief, the overflow did spread over towards Ginn Road. I'm not sure how much of an impact it had down Bacon or Fenwick, but it was that Lakeview Ravenscroft Road area that we had our initial problems with.
It's kind of twofold too. We also did have a lot of problems with the parking lot not having gates on it. So this year they're putting gates on it. They're going to be shutting it down around 7 o'clock dusk. We're having a lot of problems with roving parties that come in around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Used to be 1 or 2 a year. Now it's getting up to like maybe 6 or 7 last year. The beach is fully open this year too. Last year it was maybe half open. And with the close down of Revere Beach, I think we had a massive overflow there. But if you do go there at around, a hot weekend or the 4th of July, it's no joke to say at least, 1,000 people?
A lot of people.
Sometimes more. So there are a lot of people there. And as we saw last year with the beach itself, DCR says they're gonna put lifeguards there this year, which they're needed, because obviously we had the 2 drownings last year. I think there's just a lot of people there, with not a whole lot of beach, and with them cutting down that second parking lot, you're gonna see, people are still gonna show up. I'm hoping that DCR says they're gonna put out notifications to try to say, hey, listen, there's no parking there, go to a different location. Hopefully it works. We'll have to wait and see. We're on the same page with Medford PD and with State Barracks out of Medford to try to police the area as best we can. They're the primaries on their location, but we are there to help out, as is Medford.
At this point, any questions for the chief or Sergeant Batchelor? At this point, I'd open it up to public comment, so I'd ask that you raise your hand, come on up, state your name and your address, and we'd recognize you for about 3 minutes. Like I said, we have a full house tonight, so if you have someone that can speak for a group, that would be great. If not, certainly come forward as well. Carol, you want to start? Ching, sorry, I didn't see you.
And when we come together.
Even better.
Thank you for that intro. That was helpful to have the background. I'm Carol Savage. I live at 5 Lakeview Road. And
Eaching Scott, 2 Ravenscroft.
so we're that Lakeview Ravenscroft neighborhood. And we don't pretend to speak on behalf of all of our neighbors, but we have tried to talk to a number of the neighbors, those most impacted, especially down at the end of Lakeview Road where it hits Mystic Parkway, so that's the closest to the beach. Definitely during the COVID summers and so forth, we saw a lot of overflow parking coming into the neighborhood. And we have tried to reach out to the state reps about sort of what will the policies be on the beach. We haven't had a conversation with them, but we did get an email recently from Senator Jalen's office talking about some of the policies that they plan to use to try to keep the park safe and welcoming for the users of the park, which does include closing that lot, which does concern us. because we have seen the overflow parking even without the loss of that parking lot. So with the new facility being built, which is going to be beautiful, will be an asset for everyone in Winchester as well as surrounding communities, but it is likely, we assume, to attract more beachgoers to the beach and to the park area. So we anticipate this to be an ongoing challenge. We understand it's flowed into Ginn Road as well. What we're suggesting, based on some of the conversations we've had with a number of neighbors, is that we do what we did last year and have those signs again when the park is open. We hope that the DCR does put signage on their signs saying these are the places to park for the park, and once these lots are full, that's it. You're not supposed to park in surrounding neighborhoods. So we hope, and we're asking them for that it's on their website, that the rules around the park are clear on their website and on their signage. And then what we think might be good signage would be to have signs that say no beach parking at those 3 spots on our 3 roads, and I don't know, Ginn may feel the same way, but to say no beach parking, and that those would be up probably for the season. Ideally, we wouldn't need to have them every summer in perpetuity, but at least now, while this beach is being opened again, and people who come to the lot and see it's full, start driving around, see that this is not, you're not supposed to park on these streets for beach parking. I think the signs last year may have said residents only, and it seems to us that the no beach parking sign, based on some of the conversations we had, would do the trick and just convey the message that would solve the problem that I think that we're experiencing. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Can I look at this?
Oh,
I think it was a confluence of many things, including construction on Bacon Street last year. The 3rd year into COVID, it was a heat wave on Memorial Day weekend, and so that brought in this huge surge of people. And I think the response, we thank the police for the response to that and to temper that, the roads, and where I think we were asking for your help, assistance in that maybe something a little bit more nuanced than these residents only signs for, because it happens at different paces at different parts of that neighborhood. Lakeview and MVP gets it the most. It sort of tapers off, but we recognize that once you close off one side, it sort of goes to the other. So with these changes, including Medford putting their residents only signs on their streets, and seeing how the MBTA lot is now open instead of last year where it was partly walled off as well, and having the state push their parking into their state-owned lots rather than the neighborhoods, and seeing how that works. Ideally, we would like it to not have any sort of special treatment in that way, but for this year, if we could set the tone and say, hey, look, it's a public street, we acknowledge that, but no, we do not want to be the overflow for the state park. It's not designed to do that.
And it's also our understanding, and again, we have not yet had a conversation with the state reps on this, but we're understanding that the capacity of that the DCR has set for the beach lot is a safety issue. That too many people at the park is an unsafe situation, and there will be lifeguards now trying to guard the beach. If we allow all those streets to become parking, then the park becomes overcrowded again. So I think in the best interest of the safety of the park, as well as the overflow piece to the neighborhoods, that it seems like this would be a solution that might work for everybody. There was one other thing, and I'm forgetting. Oh, we think that, because this is going to be new, it's going to be a new park with new rules, new facilities, that it may make sense for us to see how the summer goes, to be able to communicate, assuming this works, but learn from this summer and then try to check in again at the end of the summer, you know, what did we learn? How did it go? How was it from your perspective? How was it, you know, from your perspective? And how was it from the neighbor's perspective? And I know there's other people from our neighborhood here, so if we haven't summarized that right and you want to chime in, please, you know, we ask people to come forward, so.
Thank you.
That's it, yeah.
Chief, can I ask a question just from a enforcement standpoint? Is it easier to enforce it if it's residents-only parking versus no beach parking?
I don't think so. I think the reason we went with residents only is because that's what Medford was doing, and we kind of wanted to stay consistent with what they're doing, because they're driving up and down looking for something, so as long as it was consistent, we figured, you know, they already knew they couldn't be on those roads, so. I don't think in terms of ticketing, because pretty much that's all we're gonna be able to do, unless there's a car that's blocking some type of, you know, a driveway, we can't find them, or emergency vehicles getting through, we really don't have any justification to tow them. Just ticket.
Okay. So you'll be able to decipher, in ticketing purposes, beach versus residents only?
You know, I mean, the only way we can really do that is potentially by running the plates, and, you know, we can do that.
Transfer station sticker.
No, I didn't know if we give the residents like a parking pass or something to put on their dashboard or something. I know we've done that in other areas of the town,
I
I think,
mean,
at some point.
a lot of times, you know, we can tell residents from dump stickers that are on the cars too, but, you know, residents, last year, we had a lot of problems with residents calling in, saying, you know, my friend got a ticket, you know, they were just overseeing us, which I can understand, you know, you should be able to park in front of someone's house. You know, we really did it because we felt it was a safety issue, not so much because the residents weren't, you know, thrilled with it, which I can understand, but we just thought there was way too many people at the park. So, but I see both points.
Other comments? Come on up. Can you just come to the table?
I have a quick question. I won't be long.
Yeah, we just need a microphone for our viewers at home.
Oh, okay. So I'm Rose Beecher from 6 Mystic Valley Parkway. And from observations from the past, it's really the 3 holidays that are big overflow parking. And so are the signs, would that be for all summer long or just those weekends?
Last summer, we did it for the entire summer.
Okay.
We had it even during the weekday. Is that correct, Frank?
Yeah, it was up from about mid-June till right that Monday of Labor Day.
Okay, and then I would just ask Lakeview Terrace, I think they couldn't park on Lakeview Road, so they went on Lakeview Terrace, which goes into a one-way private road with no outlet, and it's very narrow for emergency vehicles, so I would just ask that that be a part of it, that would be it,
Okay.
yeah. And that's it, thank you.
Chief, is the goal to set the tone early in the season to help kind of, you know, curtail behavior as people repeatedly come? Is that why we wouldn't want to start early?
We had a meeting with State and with Medford, and we're all on the same page. The lieutenant that runs the Medford Barracks is, she has been there a while, and I had a meeting with her, with the Medford chief, town manager. So, yeah, we're looking to, they kind of got a little bit of a jump on us already. There was a couple of really, you know, hot days, but when the holidays come up, it really is, the state police have the jurisdiction on that road. They will tow. We're there to help them. So we're gonna coordinate with them, you know, come first holiday and let them lead the way, but we'll be there with Medford to help.
Other comments? Sir in the back, want to come up?
Thank you. My name is Bob Stevens. I live on Ginn Road, number 3. And last year, we did have a problem. I think you guys came up and had to clear the road because there was parking on both sides. And we don't have any signs. We haven't had in the past, at least. And we would just ask that, I'm speaking for a few of my neighbors, too. We would just ask that you include us if there is any mitigation plan, especially now because there's some construction going on right on the corner, the house on the corner of Bacon and Ginn. I live at number 3, and this is the house right next to us, 59 Bacon. And already there's a problem with trucks and a lot of kids in the neighborhood, so we just asked that, you know, I didn't hear whether or not you're going to include us, Ginn Road, in your mitigation plan, but...
We are planning to.
Oh,
Yep.
good. I probably didn't even have to come up then.
Well, what else do you have to do on a Monday night?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
Other
luck.
comments?
Yeah.
Come on up, Mark. Again, huh?
Mark Scott,
Double
back
duty.
again, to Ravenscroft Road. My only question, Chief, is really, and I don't know if it's your jurisdiction or whose it is, but as the first comment said, the Wedgemere T-stop, the parking lot was mostly closed last year, which was very limited parking. And so I see that potentially as kind of maybe a benefit, but maybe also a problem this upcoming summer if DCR is trying to limit the number of people and they just want it to be the parking areas along Mystic Valley Parkway and then the one lot, then people making use of the Wedgemere MBTA parking on the weekend could be problematic from a quantity standpoint, but it could also be extremely beneficial to the people living on Lakeview, Ravenscroft, and Ginn, in that if I'm driving up to the beach, I look left and I see no beach parking, and there's a sign at the Wedgemere stop that's like beach overflow parking. It gives me a place to park. So I don't know what the plan is with it, and I don't really have a recommendation one way or another, but it felt like taking that into account might be helpful as a way to help mitigate some of the problems on the neighboring streets. If we can take advantage of that lot and the commuter spots from the intersection to the crosswalk.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure every year that parking lot is pretty full, pretty full. Yeah, they pack them in there any way they can, because normally the state police will ticket and tow on the parkway, so that's why normally we don't have anyone parking on the parkway.
Sir?
My name is Robert Mancini, 22 Ginn. Last year, I would walk near that Lakeview area, and I found that those signs that they put resident parking only were very effective. And I think if, those were placed also on Ginn, I think that would make a huge difference. Ginn Road, if you kind of look where you enter right off of Bacon, you hook a right, it's quite narrow. And so even if one car is parked on the road, it barely gives anyone any room to drive on the road. And if there's two cars, it's like game over. So I definitely hope that there's consideration to put those signs up. I think the resident parking only, if I was someone who's just driving around in a neighborhood, I would probably take that more seriously than no beach parking, because then you could just say, hey, I was on Ginn Fields playing with my kids or something. So I think resident only would make it seem more,
If there's a construction crew over there working on the house, we can have Franken go by and touch base with them. We've done it in a number of different locations, especially where it's a tight squeeze, to just keep everything parked on one side of the road.
Sure.
Try to keep, we have to get emergency vehicles through there, so.
Yeah.
Should be able to have at least the distance to get an ambulance or a fire truck through there.
I did notice there were some tickets last year that you guys had placed with cars that were parked going the wrong way and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, I mean, if we have people that, like I said earlier, that are blocking it to the point where an emergency vehicle can't get through, we can tow those guys.
Sure. Would it be difficult? I grew up in Medford near Tufts, and all these Tufts students were parking on a lot of the streets near where I grew up, and the city just started giving, pieces of paper from the town hall or the city hall that you could give to, a friend or a relative that was coming to visit, so that, if anyone's parking there, at least you could see that they belong there. I don't see that being that difficult to do, because there's not really a tremendous amount of people that are in that neighborhood. Would it be possible to have a resident placard placed on there? Because honestly, those streets, if you drive down up those streets, there are signs that say 2-hour parking, because I think what they wanted to do is make sure the MBTA people weren't parking there. So even for residents, it's hard to park on that street and know you could get a ticket if you're there. It says between 8 a.m. and noon, I believe. So is it possible to consider resident placards for that area? I think that would let the police know who belongs there and who doesn't.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly, it's something I think we've done in a very limited capacity.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I think, but maybe the idea of not just a resident sticker, but maybe the idea of like a visitors, where we could give you guys visitors passes so that you could use them
You could
at
use it
your
also,
will
sure.
to, you know, help folks that you have coming to visit, and the police would know not to
Yes.
ticket them.
Yeah, we have had a number of residents last summer that gave us a call and said, hey, listen, we have a graduation party, or we have something that's going on at the house, could you,
Right.
you know? So, I mean, we're reasonable. If we wind up tagging someone that is a resident or a friend of the resident calls us, you know, we can handle that, it's not an issue.
All right, thank you.
Other comments? Gentleman in the back. Come on.
Is this all public comment for that, or specifically on this?
Just specifically on this, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. Come on up.
Just one quick question. My name's Roland Anderson. I'm at 3 Lakeview Road. I thought Carol and team summarized the neighborhood views very well. One topic I'm just interested in everyone's perspective on, why are we thinking about just temporary signage? We have signage along Lakeview Road indicating no overnight parking, for example. Why not contemplate a more permanent solution, something that doesn't involve a big orange barrier in our beautiful neighborhoods? Why not think about something that's going to be a little nicer for the residents, a little nicer for visitors, but accomplishes the same objective? Thank you.
Chief. I mean,
Medford does, I don't know if you've seen the ones in Medford where they use kind of like those plastic, Jersey barriers. I don't know if the DPW has any. I mean, I don't know if that's nicer.
That looks the same.
Yeah, it's pretty much.
I mean, the point, I think, the point we're going for is to grab people's attention before they turn down the street, rather than just putting up signs. The other thing is, on, when the beach is not in season, or, you know, do you really want a street that, you know, is only for residents only, that kind of thing? I mean, it kind of curtails other people parking there, but.
Can it be during the season, only a certain, you know, time of the year?
Oh, yeah.
On the sign, that's on the sign.
No, we can get very specific. You know, other communities I've seen do that. It's just a question of, are you grabbing people's attention before they turn down the road?
Well, initially, like at Manchester by the sea, whatever, you can't park anywhere near that beach, and everyone knows that. But it took time for them to understand that, I'm sure. So initially, it's probably great to have the barriers up, and then as we see how the summer progresses, maybe revisit.
That was gonna be my recommendation. I think Carol suggested that we, you know, kind of regroup in September, so I think.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up. So I think some of us have struggled with the residents-only signs, and I'm not speaking for everybody, that it conveys a kind of unwelcoming something about us as a community. So if there's a way to, in a permanent sense, put signs up that somehow solve this problem on the street, that might be good. And I think we should think about this over the course of the summer. But it does feel like when the park reopens, some signage needs to be at the end of all these streets saying, the park is reopened, the lots for parking are here, they're not neighborhood streets. So these barriers at the end of the roads, we do feel, I think everybody feels, are going to be necessary this summer to establish the new parking patterns. And what the signs say, some of us prefer no beach parking, there may be some who prefer residents only. You may have to arbiter that among yourselves, but, you know, there are some sentiments that cover both, so think about that from your perspective.
Chief, maybe we can look at some of these other communities like Gloucester, Manchester by the Sea, that, you know, regulate the streets around there, those beaches.
A beach trip to check them out.
Preferably a 90-degree day.
Memorial Day, 10 a.m.
Come on up.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Giblin. I'm at 3 Lakeview Terrace. And I wasn't going to speak, I mean, everyone has spoken to the exact, but I just want to convey, just in case any select board members are not aware, and I know the police department are, you know, what's been more upsetting the last 2 years about this overcrowding is not necessarily the parking on the street, although obviously it's a negative. It is the overcrowding. It's been very disturbing to have the helicopters go overhead for 20 minutes while they're searching and doing the search and rescue. And, you know, as neighbors, that I think has been the most perturbing part, is knowing that, you know, these families, seeing them even park on the street and they have their, you know, their chairs and their kids, and here they are thinking they're going to have a safe time. And, you know, the helicopters do go over. I mean, we've had 2 drownings last year, but the 4-year-old 2 years before that. And it's, you know, a 20-minute just sweeping over your house on a summer afternoon. So in terms of what the neighborhood has been talking about, it really is a safety idea, that it's good that Winchester is taking responsibility for helping DCR enforce what they need to do this year, which is really make it a safe space for people. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point's well taken, and I think it seems like everyone's on the same page this year. We had a meeting with DCR, Medford officials, state police officials, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, where it seemed like everyone was on the same page that overcrowding was the real issue here, and that they were going to work diligently to kind of address that. From a public safety standpoint, I know they're trying to hire lifeguards. I think hopefully that happens. They're also looking at putting, you know, various flotation devices around the pond as well. Or the lake, I should say. And it seems like there's a concerted effort. I know you've talked to your counterparts. I know the chief of police in Medford was very vocal on the phone call. And I think it was well summarized. I don't know if everyone's seen the email from Senator Jalen's staffer, but I think that kind of summarized the call that we all had several weeks ago on that. So hopefully it's a concerted effort this year to address the overcrowding, because no one wants a loss of life at a facility that's really state-owned property, but still in our town. So, you know, I think everyone's on the same page, and I think you'll see it from the beginning. You're already starting to see it with the bollards up, the restriping of the parking lot, the beautiful facility that's there now, that there's a concerted effort to make this a family place that people can gather, enjoy a day, and be safe. So hopefully, with everyone's help, we can do that. Other comments? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing at this point. Any questions or discussion by board members?
Just wanted to say thank you for everyone coming in. It's, as I think was mentioned, it's going to be an evolving process, and, you know, enforcement is a big part of it as well, and for us to be down there, and certainly it seems crazy to say, but having lifeguards there, right, is an important step, but also not foolproof. So it's hard to control when the numbers are really high. So I think there's a lot of good suggestions here. We'll keep our fingers crossed and hopefully have a healthy and safe season. So thank you.
Other comments?
Are we taking a vote this evening so that Memorial Day is Monday?
Right.
Okay.
I was going to get to that.
I was like, I mean, it's a hearing. I don't see it. Okay.
Michelle, you always keep us on task. I appreciate that. I was going to say that. Well, that's good. I think, you know, it would be helpful for the department if we gave a directive to support these initiatives that they've been doing kind of over the last couple of years. So I think a motion would be in order if everyone felt that this was the proper pathway to give discretion to the police to try to control this. And as Mike said, it's going to be an evolving situation. It may be, you know, work for a few weeks and then we need to reconsider things, but we're aware of it. Our counterparts are aware of it in Medford, certainly. State police are aware of it, and DCF is aware of it as well. And I know our state delegation, and I think Senator Lewis and Rep. Day have kind of been spearheading this with Senator Jalen as well. You know, the collaborative effort is definitely there this year, more than I've seen in the last couple of years. So hopefully it makes a difference. And we'll do our part. So if we can just empower our department to assist and do their part, that would be great.
Thank you. So I would move that we direct the police department to install similar signage as last year on, oh, the map is gone, Lakeview, Ravenscroft, and Ginn Road.
And any streets, and I would just add, any streets in the vicinity that, in the discretion of the police that need additional measures.
That works.
Is there a second?
Second, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, so that passes. So I want to thank everyone for coming in tonight. I appreciate it. And like I said, this is an evolving situation. Just keep us updated as we go through. Thank you. Before Sergeant Batchelor and the Chief leave, I just want to thank you all for your hard work this past weekend with the Inca Fair. DPW, police, fire were all tested this weekend in different emergencies. We had a gas leak, had a water main break, and we had the fair with thousands of people here. So in a parade.
Perfect storm,
And,
yeah.
you know, it was a all hands on deck kind of weekend, and we appreciate everything you did to keep everyone safe and moving forward. So thank you for all your hard work. And I know it's not over. You got the parade this weekend and then Town Day next weekend. So,
Yeah, we're busy.
but thank you all. We appreciate it.
Got to keep testing you guys because you handled it so well. It's like,
Well, we finally got our sergeants list, so we're getting there. We're getting there slowly. We're getting there.
Good. Well, thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you.
thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, at this point, because the hour's growing late and I know there's other individuals here, I'm going to open it up to general public comment at this time for anything that anyone's here to speak about. I'd recognize you for about 3 minutes on any topic that you want to talk about. Just ask that you come on up and state your name for the record and your address. Is there anyone here? Come on up. How are you?
Hi, good. Good. Good start? Yep. Great. My name is Paras Bayani. I live on 307 Cross Street, north side of Winchester, with my wife Asmina and 2 young children. I'd like to make a statement about something that I know has been on the Select Board's agenda in recent weeks, and I believe you're going to be considering over the next few weeks. And I'll say at the start, I'm making the statement on behalf of 6 other families as well, whose names I can submit, for the record. The agenda item I wanted to talk about, again, not tonight, but in recent weeks, it's been on the agenda, has been the state of Winchester's playgrounds. And I wanted to convey, on behalf of the group of families that I'm speaking for, who all have young children, who utilize the parks and playgrounds, that we really see a real benefit to the community in undertaking a repair program for these assets. So let me go through a few reasons for why I say that and some of the logic behind what our view is. So I think first and foremost, most people would have the view that a common reason people choose to move to Winchester is because it is considered one of the best places in Greater Boston to raise a family. And while the schools are certainly the most important element of that, the recreational assets of our town, including our parks and playgrounds, are a very close second part of that appeal. The other point I would make is that if you were to poll young families, my guess, poll young families around what is the top town service that they would like to see improved, overwhelmingly they would cite the quality of our playgrounds as an area for improvement. Let me just give you a couple examples. I live on the north side of Winchester. Near our home is McDonald Field. We moved there to that part of town about 19 months ago. In that 19 months, we've gone from 6 swings to 5 to 4. The monkey bars have been pulled down and boarded up, and that's in addition to a number of other items of disrepair throughout the park. There are a number of parks nearby us in even worse shape. Leonard Field is boarded up in numerous places and has a structurally unsound bridge. All of this is frustrating, even embarrassing to a number of residents. And like most families, we have a number of parks outside of Winchester, in our case in Woburn, Belmont, that we frequent rather than attending our own parks here in town. I'll conclude by noting that while I understand capital dollars are very precious and very sought after in town, I would submit a few items for your consideration. First, a relatively small investment here can have outsized impact on residents' quality of life. We're talking about swings, monkey bars, wood chips, grass, other very inexpensive elements. Tens of thousands of dollars, more than likely, of investment in most of these parks. We're not talking about a new building that would cost many millions of dollars for a single asset. At the same time, this is work that would benefit hundreds, if not a few thousand families, given how many young families there are in town and how extensively our parks are utilized. Second, and I know Member Pryor said this many times publicly, it is far cheaper to maintain assets that taxpayers and donors have already financed rather than get behind the ball and have to undertake full reconstructions of these assets. And third, Winchester may need, as all of you know better than me, to come back to taxpayers soon for an operating override to support the Community Preservation Fund or other requests for capital programs. In that context, my view, and on behalf of a number of families, is that a strong track record of continued stewardship of the community's assets, as the town has undertaken over the last several years, will go a long way towards convincing residents to continue to invest in town services. Just a successful delivery of a number of school projects helped set the stage for an 80+% vote on behalf of the Lynch project this past January. So as you undertake this discussion around a comprehensive repair program for the town's parks and playgrounds, I hope that it's something that all of you will support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne.
Other comment? Who's next? You're both looking at each other. Come on up to. Hi.
Hi, my name is Tim Matthews, and we live at 23 Kenron Road. It's my husband and our children. And we're here to speak in support of the Pride Proclamation, which is on your agenda as number 2 for business tonight. I just wanted to, I'll start by actually, if you can all take one. I've got an updated copy of a statement that I sent over to you earlier today from a number of community groups as well as individuals, particularly those who are elected to boards and town meeting as well in our community. In support of the Pride Proclamation being enacted by the Select Board. As you know, this year the Select Board will, and the town will not be co-sponsoring the Pride Fest, which is spearheaded by the Network for Social Justice. But I think it's important, that we continue to support the LGBTQIA+ community in Winchester by acknowledging that June is a very special month. In fact, our son came home today and said, did you know today is, do you want to say? Today is actually Harvey Milk Day. Obviously a supervisor in San Francisco who was assassinated in the line of duty. And so it's not just the month of June that happens to be an important month. I did a little bit of preparation while sort of talking about this with the Winchester community, and I learned that there are events that happen in the community all year round, both in our schools as well as events that are run by community groups. And I think that by enacting this proclamation, the Select Board recognizes the work that's done all year round, and also the special place that June has as the month during which the Stonewall riots happened. I believe it's now 54 years ago. So strongly encourage you on behalf of all of the people that are co-signatories to the statement, as well as many more, I'm sure, who, if there were more time, would also potentially have added their names to the statement, and hope that you are able to support our community and our family and all the families and folks like ours who are living in Winchester and in the surrounding communities. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. See you guys.
All right, and now these guys are going home for a very quick bedtime.
Anyone else here for public comment?
Hi, I'm Seamus Brady. I live at 15 Clematis Street. I just want to echo what the prior two speakers said. I think first, on the playgrounds, we have a lot of potential. I'll speak on behalf of my son Calder. He's quite enamored with our Leonard Field playground, but he certainly would like to have some of the things back. There was a climbing structure, it's gone. There were elements that came off the side, they're gone. So we've lived near the field since 2014, and every year it's deteriorated and there's been zero investment in it. So 9 years is a long time with no investment in a playground. I grew up in Arlington. There's Joey's Park in Belmont. There's the Lexington playground near their high school and public pool. And those are both, I mean, they put us to shame. So it's embarrassing when you compare our playgrounds to our surrounding peer towns. And just to Tim and Greg's point, I also hope that you will support that proclamation. I think it's really important, and I think it's important to say what we value and who we support, and I think it means a lot, and it really sets a great example. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
I gotta go grocery shopping now.
Thanks. Anyone else here for public comment?
Hi, I'm Wenji. I just heard of this meeting yesterday. So I'm coming here because, so I live in Chestnut Street, and we moved here last year. And so we live in Somerville for a while, and my kid is almost 3 years old now. She loved to play in the playground every day. And when we're in Somerville, there are like 3 or 4 playgrounds, just like in 5 minutes walking distance to our home. And all of them have water fountain. They can play in the summer because it's super hot, and that's just super nice for them to have. And there's also like the drinking like water fountain. So if adults or kids are thirsty, they can easily have accessibility to water. And they also have place to wash their hands, because kids can get their hands super dirty in the playground, of course. And in Winchester, it just not exist. None of them have any of the access to water, play with them or drinking them. And when I asked around, they said, you can go to Woburn or Medford, but you have to drive there. And we only have 1 car at home. So the best thing to do is to walk with my kid. And I think like here in the suburb, lifestyle is a little different, but still have accessibility to all of these amenities, super important, and it's just super nice for kids to have a fun childhood, and also for parents to socialize with their neighbors. Because if we drive further away, we don't see them every day, and it doesn't feel like you're in the neighborhood. So the belonging of a neighborhood in the community is just so important. That's associated with playground. And also I see some equipment got broken, like in the Gene Field playground. There's a seesaw, and somehow it just got removed because it's broken, but never got replaced back. And also at Kids Corner, that's in the Winchester Recreation Center, I saw there are some fences was built last winter, and it seems like there's going to be some work, and then they were taken away, and nothing was done. So I have no idea what happened or was planned to do. And it's really nice to have those playgrounds, but I never see any kids playing in the Kids Corner after school time, or the Lincoln Elementary School playground after school time. So the only place that seems to have more kids around my neighborhood is the Gene Field. So I'm thinking it's like a chicken and egg thing. If you have better amenities, there are more kids willing to go there. And if you left things just like old and not maintained, or like there's nothing fun or exciting there and nobody wants to go, and it's like that. Yeah, and then everybody will just buy those playsets at home. And that's like common thing in Winchester, but also you cannot replace with a playground because people can socialize there, and kids and adults. And it's nice to enjoy the public service as well. That's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tom Philippone, 11 Atherton Road. It's playground night, so I'm also here to speak on behalf of that. So I won't belabor the point. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone here. My wife and I and my 3-year-old kid have only been here for about 9 months, so we have been to every playground multiple times. Maybe the reason why some are broken, but ultimately, the only thing I'll add here is I think, like I said, everyone's for playgrounds here. No one's going to be anti-playground. I think it's what we're driving for is an approach. Just like the earlier conversation about the solar panels, when I came here early, it was hey, we're replacing Lynch's roof because we don't want it to be a problem. We're thinking about a maintenance contract for solar panels because we want to get ahead of it. So I think everyone wants that sense of community, so I think it's a stressing of, can we get ahead of it? Can we keep these and maintain, a pillar of our community for, 25% of the population are kids. So can we support that and continue to make for an amazing community? So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Let's get to our business agenda. Beth, I'll have you do your town manager's report later, and we'll do donations after that. I see the people from 99 Lawson license agreement here. If that's quick, if anyone has any significant questions, I'd call them up, and we can do that pretty quickly. Is that okay? All right. do we even need to call them up, or if we
I
could
don't think
just?
so,
All right,
yeah.
you want to just
So,
explain it back?
we have, a resident at 99 Lawson Road who is installing a new sewer line and would like to cross, the town-owned, or the town's water, easement, which is a 20-foot wide easement. It's just, there's a, copy of the plan in your packet. It's just crossing a very small corner of the easement, and it does not affect our water line. And I worked with council to draft the agreement that you see in your packet. And if everyone is okay with it, my recommendation is that you vote to approve and authorize me to sign the agreement.
Any questions, discussion?
Nope.
Okay, that's good to me. All right, is there a motion?
Yep. I move that we approve and authorize the 99 Lawson Road license agreement, and authorize the town manager to sign the 99 Lawson Road license agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes. You're all set. Thank you. Is anyone here for the village license agreement? No, I don't think so. All right, we'll take that back in a little bit. Let's do the health department. I see Jen and Dot are here. Anyone else? Oh, Ruth, see you in the back. Come on up. How are ya? All right. So we heard a little bit about this at town meeting from Ruth about, rats and updates from the Board of Health. So we thought we'd have you come to a meeting and maybe present to the full board rather than town meeting floor, so that maybe if anyone has any questions or comments or anything, they can do that. So Jen, if
Sure,
you want to
so,
start?
yeah. So this is probably a discussion that is a long time coming, but it has to do with rodenticides, specifically second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, or SCARs. They're really the most lethal, most effective, popular because they are most effective. And the problem, though, the unfortunate downside to that is the SCARs stay in animal tissue of a rodent longer than the first generation did, so therefore, birds of prey and other predatory animals are likely to eat the rodents who have consumed the SCARs and also be subject to injury and death. And and as we've seen, it's been in the media quite a lot lately. So the point is, what are we going to do, if anything, about it? And we had a meeting, Beth and I, the DPW director, as well as some other people in-house, to try to talk about how we can scale back our use of SCAR, specifically on town property. And so what we've come up with is essentially an incremental plan to, in fact, do that, because there are plenty of alternate strategies, albeit with an additional cost, but there are alternate strategies such as rodent birth control, carbon dioxide, smart boxes, which Ruth explained at town meeting. And we've already begun to sort of experiment with two of those strategies, the carbon dioxide for the treatment of rat burrows, as well as the smart boxes up at the community garden where there was a large problem identified. And they've been effective. And it's sort of a way for us to gauge, should we invest in these going forward? And so the jury's a little bit out on the smart boxes, although other towns have claimed that they've been effective. We will continue with that at the community garden, but certainly the CO2 treatment worked really well. But there are other strategies, as I mentioned, and we'll start to incrementally roll those out across the town-owned properties. And we've also dedicated to town projects. Those developers must agree to alternate strategies as well when they engage with the town.
So it would be for town, our own projects, right? So when we're bidding a construction project, we could ask our consultants to put an alternate specification together that would require the use of whatever smart boxes or whatever method we choose.
Right. Yeah. And we'll also do a push to promote alternative strategies with, we'll talk to the planning board, ZBA, building department as well, but also do a push amongst our restaurants in town that obviously hire PCOs or pest control operators to manage or eliminate pests in their establishments. So there's an opportunity for education there. The one thing we can't do as a town is completely ban rodenticide use on private property. That is a sort of a state function. The state preempts that, so we cannot do that. But we can certainly provide education to the town and the residents about the harms of eschars and provide information on other means of eliminating rodents. So that's sort of the status of things with that right now.
I think we'll pause there and see if any members have any questions about that.
I guess my question's like kind of magnitude, right? Or how are you measuring impact? Not that you can do like a rat census, but how do you know that it's effective compared to, like, what's your baseline? Do you have a target?
Mm-hmm.
How, like,
right.
What's the data?
You mean other than a before and after,
Right.
for example?
I don't know if we have a before, but how do we know that we're having an impact? And do we have any sense of how much more we need to do?
Mm-hmm. So there are rodent surveys you can do, and I have in past years looked to consultants for that. For example, you can do sewer surveys to see what your populations are and so forth. So this can be done at a cost, but right now we're just doing it sort of by location. What's it look like now after treatment? What are we seeing from that, right? So it's just really a location by location type of thing right now. But
Yeah.
if we wanted to do a more community-wide survey, that is certainly doable.
My question wasn't about community-wide, it was just more about you're seeing something, so that tells you might want to scale, right? And we'll revisit that at some point. But you're seeing some early returns are good, I assume?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we had talked about, aside from the community garden where they've been successful, we had talked about converting town hall just as a first kind of to see how it goes to the alternate smart box methodology, which is significantly more expensive than what we do today. So there is a cost if we were to roll this out townwide to all municipal buildings. I think it's like $300 per box plus like $100 a month maintenance fee. So it's significant. So we had talked to Pete Lawson about rolling it out in town hall. I think they'll do that at the beginning of the next fiscal year, just to like have it, see how it goes in one building, and then have a wider conversation about expansion.
Other comments? Questions?
John loves it. I have a rat
$400
question.
for a rodent apartment, come on,
Yeah.
it's a lot of dough.
I'll just say thank you. Actually, yeah, I've heard from a lot of residents about this and concerns about it, so I'm glad that the health department and the Board of Health is taking this up, and so appreciate it. So.
And there is a group in town that I have been having.
Yeah, they've reached out to us as well, I think, and so and we've heard in surrounding communities the problems, right? So I think these, we see it everywhere, and it's probably something that's off a lot of people's radar, but when you look closely, so there's need for change. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I appreciate, as I'm familiar with the garden, and I appreciate that there has been really sort of effective control there. So sort of in thinking of that area around Right Lock Farm, as well as down towards the Mystic Lakes, where we know those bald eagles that were roosting in Arlington Cemetery are, is there any sort of targeted communications to residents in those areas around different types of rodenticides, and just sort of being aware of, I guess, the fells as well, areas where there are sort of birds of prey that are eating those rats and mice and other things that give me the creeps, but is there sort of planned or existing strategies to especially reach those areas that are really tangential to the wildlife?
Well, I think it would make sense to do more of a community-wide education piece, right? Because this can impact anyone, any predator, anywhere, right? And rats are widespread throughout Massachusetts. Our winters are more mild, the populations aren't dying off at the rate they really should to be a little bit more manageable. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. So really, I think what maybe best is if we did some type of educational piece for the entire community. We do have information on our website now, but that's more of sort of a passive approach to this, so maybe more of an active campaign to get the word out and educate on what these other means are. Did you want to add anything?
I'll just add
Yeah.
that, yes, the Board of Health set this as a priority at our either last meeting or the meeting before, and certainly public education is a primary tool for public health, and that is something that we've been talking about, and we'd like to roll out some kind, we haven't discussed the details of that, we certainly want to be working with the town closely when we do that, but some kind of I like Arlington's approach, which states front and center that rodents are a community problem and require a community response. And so it's kind of all hands on board in terms of education, of not leaving food out, not, making sure your trash barrels are covered, not leaving inadvertently water sources, and all of the other issues that we want to bring forward. So we'd like to work with, with you going forward and roll something out. Perhaps late summer, early fall, something, as soon as we can.
Yeah, no, I mean, just keep us updated, I think is the best approach. Sounds like we're moving in the right direction. It's just incremental change is necessary given the costs associated with it, so.
Right.
Any other comments?
Just wanted to say, additionally too, with all the construction that the town is under, right, that tends to bring dislodge, bring a lot of rodents to the surface, and so I think having this incremental approach and really taking a look at what other communities doing, specifically Arlington, I think is great. I think it's helpful for residents that are in a community that's or in an area of the town that's under construction, which is a lot of people that do see it's a problem that we're still addressing it. As you're saying, Ruth, it's a problem. So it's not something that we're looking the other way on. We're just addressing it in a different way.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Were you
The
gonna
next
speak about
item, Jen, the one-day liquor.
You're going to speak about the one-day liquor now? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. I did submit to you some suggestions to alter your regulations for the one-day alcohol temporary license. And I just wanted to offer sort of the public health perspective as to why these recommendations are necessary. Back in 2018, I think it was 2018, we had submitted recommendations, but this is more of an expansive list, and it's really, based on data, which there is a plethora of data showing correlation between alcohol consumption and alcohol harms, as we all probably know. And I laid out in the cover letter there some of the links that you can look at, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's plenty more if you want it. But the point is there are physical, mental, and mental harms associated with the consumption of alcohol. As we know, there are short-term consequences, long-term health consequences, and we can go through some of what that is, but it's anything from cancer, as we've heard in the news recently, and that is various forms of cancer, from breast cancer, throat, mouth, etc. And you don't need to consume a lot of alcohol, as it turns out, to actually be subject to cancer potentially from alcohol consumption. So we're talking about long-term effects like cancer. We're talking about short-term effects like alcohol poisoning. We're talking about harms like car crashes, other consequences to us as a town, visits to the ER. So we're all familiar that there's plenty of data, plenty of substantiated evidence that links alcohol consumption to harm. So there's no need to necessarily go over that anymore. But a couple things that I think are important. You have a tool that's available to you, and that's to regulate this through policy, right? And that is really the number one way to reduce alcohol consumption by youth and alcohol consumption by the community at large, to reduce the physical, mental, and otherwise harms, and to create and foster really a healthy environment for people.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think policy versus education is superior?
I think the data shows that the policy and regulation is the number one tool.
Really?
I think the education then flows naturally out of that. But yes.
Wow, surprising.
Yeah, so this is your opportunity, and specifically around the one-day licenses, because it's sort of, it needs to be tightened up a little bit. And I've listed some of the regulations if you want to go through it, but really, I think regulating opportunities for alcohol consumption, right? It sounds sort of common sense, but that is the best way to limit how much people are drinking, and if they're drinking, is to regulate the opportunities that you present to the community or allow for the community to take advantage of that, of the alcohol. And so we're talking about perhaps limiting number of permits, time, hours. Those types of things are up to you to implement if you choose, and are found in the second page under the recommendations there. So these are things you could integrate into your existing regulations that you have already. And if you, I don't know if you wanted to go through them, Rich, or talk about them at all, but these are all evidence-based best practice. They're not things that are just sort of made up and sound good. They come from substantiated science, is my point.
Yeah, so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this has been on the radar for the health department for a while now with the coalition. It's just, you guys have been a little busy these last couple of years, so it's kind of taken a seat to the back burner, but as, you know, we get back to the new normal, it's kind of something that's important to, that you both brought up. I know that you've gone through it. I think some of this is state law. Some of this stuff, you're just reiterating what the state law is that people might not be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But others are some specific changes. And just from a stamp, I guess, from a starting point, you know, the way Winchester works is we have the one-day liquor license that we apply to all events open to the public, right? So if you're going to have an event open to the public, you need to apply for a one-day liquor license at a public setting. So if I'm having an event at Right Lock Farm or the Griffin Museum, then I need to apply for a one-day liquor license. If it's something that's a private event, like invite only, you know, these necessarily don't apply. Is that?
For example, in your house,
Yeah,
is
your
that what you
house,
mean?
right,
Right,
yeah.
no.
So, and I think what we've asked town council to look at is, you know, if there is, because my understanding is that these vary from town to town around us, and in the Commonwealth. And what we've asked town council to look at is are we applying the one-day liquor license rule correctly? I guess, is there any scenario where you could be having an event in a public setting where you don't necessarily need to apply for a one-day liquor license? For example, if I owned a store and I was just having a 10th anniversary party or something like that, and it was invite only, do I need to have a one-day liquor license? So I think with that being the backdrop, you know, we're trying to first figure out when we need to have people apply for a one-day liquor license, and then also, you know, tighten up the regulations, you know, to make sure that everyone's safe and that we're meeting the, you know, what the health department, and I assume the Board of Health and the coalition feel are safety measures that we should have in place for these events. So I think the biggest change, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be, is it number 2? Is that where we're requiring a tip certified person at all events, or is that required now?
Yeah, so there, let's see. Yep, so number 2C, correct. So it would be, the applicant would have to provide evidence of responsible beverage service, like a tip certification. And tip certification is something that can be undertaken either in person or online. We don't differentiate. The point is that they get the certification so that they know how to safely serve alcohol.
And then everything else is kind of just tightening up, you know, what have been kind of the rules that you've kind of passed along, but, you know, necessarily haven't been recorded, kind of like best practices that when these licenses come in, that are considered and kind of implemented. Am I correct in saying that?
Sorry, say that again. I was reading.
So everything else on here is kind of best practices that you've encouraged people to follow in implementing one-day liquor
Yeah, right.
permits.
So largely, it's either
evidence-based, right, science-based, or best practices, meaning there is evidence there that these are effective, whether it be through other communities or something like that.
Or their state law, like the one about number, like it's 10 that says they have to purchase alcohol from a package or retail.
Right, that's,
Right, yeah.
that was something the ABCC.
Right, which I don't think anybody
requires. No,
realizes, right?
right,
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Anything else, Jen, on this, before we open it up to questions? Ruth or Dot, if you wanted to weigh in?
No, I really think two is really
Yeah.
the crux of it all.
I think this, oh, sorry,
No,
go ahead.
but I think we have run into some challenges with people not understanding some of this, and what we're trying to do is put it into a form that they can follow, understanding when it's beneficial, rather than, accusatory. I think sometimes people feel that we're attacking them and preventing them from, sponsoring or holding events, and that's really not the case. And also, I think we have to realize that with our youth, we have to be very careful because, they see what we do, and it may not always be best practice.
Yeah, in our 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey data shows that, the number one, drug of choice is alcohol for our high school students. 23% have consumed alcohol. So I think there's that data that we need to be mindful of. There's data that 31% of our high school kids also, their mental health is not ideal. They've identified themselves as not feeling 100%, right? So we have to understand that alcohol consumption can trigger anxiety, depression over the long term, and I think
And
that...
you need to self-medicate oneself if you're not feeling great about yourself.
Right, right. So there's a lot of negative consequences to this, as I'm sure we all know, but it locally, when we speak to what's going on in our own community and in our own state, there are things we have to be mindful of, and this will go a long way as a protective factors for our community.
So the goal tonight is not necessarily to vote a policy, is to kind of give feedback to Jen on the path she's going on, and see if it's something that the board would be willing to take up. We'd probably then, solicit input from the community, make sure that, the business community is aware of it, and other members. And take it up kind of at a later date. I know the Board of Health wanted to weigh in as well, on the policy as well, so.
Did you happen to talk to any frequent users of the one-day license, whether it's Right Lock Farm, and run these by them and say, do they find these burdensome or not, or they were happy to comply with these and this wouldn't be an issue?
So I'm coming at this from a public health perspective, so are you talking about a business impact?
No, just,
Just how they
I want to have
feel.
an event. I have a bundle of rights as a citizen. You're sort of constrain them here and making it harder for me to do what I've always done, which is something what I felt was for public good. It wasn't a drinking fest. We hired a firm to come in and serve the alcohol, and now this just seems like it's more of a challenge. And we've had people in here recently complaining about or voicing their concern that the town is really starting to encroach on their rights. And so I'm sensitive to it.
Mhm.
Not that this isn't a good idea, there's a lot of great ideas in here, and really I just need to take the current form and compare it to this and find out what's law and what's not law, and all those kinds of things as a thoughtful person should do. So that's why I was wondering, is just, because I think that that's the part of our community too.
Mhm.
And they may say, hey, these are all great,
Mhm.
and I think that'd be pretty cool.
Mhm.
And if they have issues with some, then it might be good to understand those. We talk through them, we come to an agreement, say, okay, well,
Mhm.
maybe that doesn't work, but this does, and then it's acceptable to everybody.
Yeah, I think what I'm putting forth are the best public health recommendations, and I don't think I should be the one to negotiate those because they're fact.
No, I wasn't asking you to negotiate them. I was just asking, had you checked with them? And you said you hadn't, you just did business based on policy. Okay, fine.
No,
Yep,
because
thank you.
they're facts. So you can.
I know I can.
Yeah,
No,
that's
I
great.
understand that, but thank you for letting me know that.
I think you know, being someone who's put on a lot of events in town and getting one-day liquor licenses, I think we're following, you know, and I won't speak for Right Lock, but, you know, I can tell you from running Chili Fest or
80% of
something.
those.
Yeah, 80%, at least the beer garden, you know, we're following most of these stuff because it's
That's really
it's
just my
state law.
question.
Yeah. So I don't think it's gonna have too much of an impact. The only thing maybe, I mean, I really can't think, I'm trying to think of an event at Right Lock that would have an issue, or a public event that, the only thing, you know, the hours of an event, I mean, that's, so state law says 10 a.m., I think, is the earliest we can serve, alcohol. And then ceasing service 30 minutes before the event. That might not be state law or anything like that, but kind of best practices, just to make sure that everything's safe. But I mean, certainly that's kind of part of the process, John, is to put this out in the public and have those stakeholders kind of weigh in.
They may all say it's great. You know, they probably will.
I think, so my take is the people that routinely apply for one-day licenses, like the Griffin Museum or Right Lock Farm, might not necessarily have an issue with this. I think it's the businesses that do the sip and shops, or like Bagel and Brew, that we keep, you know, giving one-day liquor licenses for, I'm on here this week, for, you know, their boozy brunches, things like that, or bookends, or things like that. The smaller people, I think, to your point, John, once we have a policy in place, I think everyone, you know, there's an educational component of that, and I think then, you know, for example, the chamber is probably interested in running a tip certified, you know, having somebody come in, get everyone tip certified, that kind of thing, that's gonna be putting on these events. But I think it's more of an impact on those types of businesses.
I agree.
And not necessarily the bigger entities that are like catering centers that, you know, typically do this on a week in, week out basis.
So
Yeah.
I would just add that I think, I agree, yes, but I think having been a lot closer to Right Lock Farm events, having been on the board there for 5 years, some of these changes of, you know, one person who signs the application must be the person there for the duration of the event, and, you know, must serve food and show the menu of the food. So if this is taken at the letter of the law, there's a lot of enforcement and a lot of ways you can get sideways with these regulations. So Rich signed it, he had every intention of being there, something came up, someone else had to step in. Or my tip certified bartender who was 21 isn't available, I have a 20-year-old tip certified bartender, I can't use them. Do I cancel my event? I think the spirit is right, but I think we would just have to vet it with enforcement, and do we truly mean that if they're not there, the event has to end, right? I mean, is that what the intent is? It sounds like yes, that's what the policy would say.
Yes, and maybe we tweak the application to say, you know, you have a backup person, or things to consider for your event ahead of time, so there are ways to mitigate for that. But at the end of the day, yes, you're right.
So, and I guess the other thing too, from price points, because I think that gets to sort of staffing and cost, you know, different cups and different staffing ratios and different expectations of resourcing, you know, personnel for the event. Because I don't think we have a problem of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and the police chief was just here, but I don't know that we have a problem of 20-year-olds getting drunk at the Griffin Museum, you know, patio parties, so, or, you know, teenagers, and I read the research and I totally agree with the adverse effects. I just don't know that we have a community problem with these, in these one-day instances versus what the risk youth survey might indicate is drinking in the Fells or in the town forest across the street from my house, right? So if that's not necessarily the critical mass problem, and I'm looking at what there might be for staffing concerns, I think it makes the liquor license fee may not, it's still $75, right? The cost of the license doesn't change, but the cost of the event changes. And I know we're at the farm trying to make dinners and other events tiered pricing to make it more affordable, to make it more accessible. The cost of that event goes up. The cost of everyone attending that event goes up to comply. So I think we have to balance, you know, the question, you know, the response to John, is it a business problem? I'm not saying it's a business problem, but these are, you know, a lot of these one-day event license holders, Sanborn House, Griffin Museum, Right Lock, not taking bookends and bagels and brew. They're nonprofits trying to fundraise and trying to have events to raise money for their bottom line, mission-driven organization. And I'm not saying we can't find a policy middle ground, but I would certainly, you know, sort of tilt toward what they've done, unless we have evidence that what they're doing now is causing an adverse effect in the community that we can tie to these one-day licenses. I think I'd rather make an incremental approach, or we at least talk with them and realize that what's proposed is what they do anyway. I don't know, but on the face of it, we'd have to find some ways to mitigate or have Plan A and Plan B that's still in the spirit of what's proposed.
You're asking for direct, causation evidence, and, I mean, I don't know, can we say that, our domestic assault increase is due to the one-day temporary licenses? I don't think we're gonna find causational data for that. But, what we know is this data, is expanding alcohol opportunities does lead to an increase in domestic violence incidents. It does lead to other harms in the community. So I think we have to recognize that and put in these protective factors, not wait until there's a problem, not wait until we can draw a causation. It's a preventative approach for a healthier community at large, right? So yes, is there a cost? The alcohol industry pumps billions of dollars into getting us to drink. Let's not forget that, right? And the harms that we pay out, even in Massachusetts, are billions compared to the millions we receive in taxes from the alcohol industry. Harms are billions, taxes we collect are millions. So why, I guess I understand there's a cost. I understand there's a cost passed on to the business, but it's almost as if we, that's gonna be the cost of making this safer.
And I think I'm making a distinction between a business and a nonprofit as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I think Anthony has something to say.
Yeah, and I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be a leader in making things safer. It would be helpful to understand, I was just trying to do a quick search for them. It would be helpful to understand how these are in line with other towns as well. Are we behind the times with our policy right now? Are we kind of in line and everyone's starting to shift? I don't, this seems like many of these things are very straightforward, and as Rich mentioned, for our businesses, and I think it's like the midnight madness shopping thing, that it is a great opportunity to be sort of coordinated, to have a tips training. Tips training is not, as you mentioned, there's like a slew of people, like in college, there's a slew of people who will get it done so they can help out with events. It's not a prohibitive thing, things like that. But I sort of agree with Michelle's point. I believe just like making sure that if we're saying that this one person must be named, that's not necessarily a blocker if a caterer's bartender who was named has to call out that day that they have to cancel a wedding, right? That's seems a little bit extreme, but to be able to have that policy sort of flexible enough that you have one person designated in charge, but
just so you know, licensed caterers are exempt from this.
Okay.
Just by the state, they're exempt. It's a separate state license.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, I know the Chamber's kind of started to gather that data, and it really spans the gamut from, our neighbors in Malden and Burlington, really limiting the amount of licenses people can get. I think it's like 1 in Malden, I think it's 5 in Belmont per year. Not Belmont, excuse me, Burlington. And, then there's other towns on the opposite spectrum that, don't apply in certain circumstances if you're serving just beer and wine. So it really spans the gamut, so.
Anthony, to answer your question, as a member of the Mystic Valley Coalition, with all the surrounding towns, Melrose, Lakefield, Reading, Malden, all of us, we're all in the same dilemma right now. We're all working on policies such as this and trying to become uniform, because more and more opportunities out there. Now the beer gardens are being introduced. The sip and shops are very, very popular. Something like what Bookends is doing with wine tasting, so forth. So we're trying to look at the best way to address all of this as preventative measures and not wait till we have a crisis and then try and put something and implement it. So we're working hard on it, so.
Well, and I think it makes a lot of sense also to be working together and sharing those resources,
Yes.
and then coming up with something that's
Right.
not just, a good policy that we've agreed on, but also it's a good policy and it's widespread. And if there is crossover from someone in a neighboring town doing an event, then they know what to expect.
Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I did, yeah. Sorry, I'll be quick. I know that we've been talking about this for a little while, but I appreciate this effort. It's a great place for us to start a conversation that I know the coalition and the Board of Health has been engaged in for a long time, kind of behind the scenes. And we changed the structure, the fee structure a few years back to, remove that barrier for, nonprofits and people saying, hey, we're only going to, have 20 people at our event. We're trying to raise $500 and you're killing us here. So I think we addressed the financial piece there. And what I've seen is, as we've added some more kind of procedural safeguards around the licenses, is that the organizations have adjusted, when we've done that, and they've responded to, additional precautions, which, are, really just protective for, our residents and send the message that we should. So I haven't seen that anytime that we increase some of our messaging or some of our regulations, that events have stopped or decreased, right? I think that they still are at a very high level, a high volume. So, I'm to John's point. I think reaching out to some of our heavy hitters that are very regular applicants and saying, hey, is there anything here that's going to put the brakes on for you and your events in a way that is either difficult to understand from the language you're using or is too much of an overreach. So. But I think that the policy objective that you're addressing here, is the right one for us to be talking about. And so, thanks.
John, you raised a good point. It does have to be educational too. We just can't put this out in front of people. We talked about that recently and said, with a movement of educating everybody as to why we're doing these things.
I just look at smoking, and that was a very successful campaign. The pictures of those people half dead or dead on the cigarette packs and the TV commercials, and I think that turned a lot of people off. Said, I don't want to end up that way.
Education is a big component of this as well.
And I think my only point was, let's craft something together with the users to achieve our public policy goal. That was really it.
Yeah, so maybe, Jen, the next step would be to engage those routine users, routine people that apply.
I think as a member of the Chamber Board, for as long as I have been, for 23 years, I think the Chamber would love to have something as a reference point to assist the businesses in totally understanding what they cannot do, and not get frustrated.
Right.
We've had some instances where the small business has been a little upset, so we want to make them happy.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you all for coming in.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, next up, we have the Pride Month proclamation. Is someone from the network, do you want to be heard on this, or you want us just to consider it? Perfect. So has everyone had a chance to look at the proclamation in our packet? Any questions? Discussion?
I think it's great. I really appreciate the work that went into it and the support behind it, and coordinating this to come to the town and to come to us in order that we can vote on this prior to the month of June, and affirm that Winchester is an inclusive community, and that we recognize June as Pride Month, along with the state and the town and the state and the country. And of course, it also really reinforces the human rights statement that we have as a town, putting that into it. I think if I were to tally up of all the issues and things that have come before us since I joined the board, I've by far received the most emails on this, and probably also certainly the most emails in the shortest period of time. So I think that's really wonderful that there's such strong support from members of the community.
Anyone else?
I agree.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to echo Anthea's point, it's really important for us to, restate the values of our community, and certainly the board here, I'm sure, agrees with this policy, and so constantly updating where we are so the community knows that what's important to them is important to us as well. I've long thought that we should evaluate whether to have a human rights committee or commission here within town government. We certainly are not lacking for the amount of committees that we have. But I think there's independent of saying it, the actual doing it and applying it to what we do in town hall and in town government every day, reinforcing it, knowing it's there. I think the schools do have a little bit more visibility to some of those issues on a regular basis, and so I think they have a lot more policies in place around that. But I think it would be worthwhile for us to have a discussion at some point of what that would look like, and so we're saying to the community, we're always looking through that lens when with everything that we do, whether we're trying to fund solar panels or we're talking about anything that we do. So that I just want to echo my support, and I appreciate we certainly have received a lot of comments and support for this, and I'm sure that there's a lot more people out there that would like to see us do it. I'd like to also see us be a little bit more visible in town government. If we're during Pride Month, it seems strange that we don't have a flag on town hall in the front or in the community. We have hanging baskets, but I mean, it would be on lampposts, but it'd be nice if we had flags around and to make all members of our community feel welcome. And I think that the cost is probably minor, and but I think it sends the right message to the community that we're thinking about these things year round, not just during a certain month or to a certain day or voting on a certain proclamation. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, I just echo what everyone said already. Certainly, these are always works in progress. This is a great step for this town. We have a great amount of events planned for the month of June, I believe, through the network. Thank you for all your hard work. I saw that the outlines on the windows have all gone up, so there should be some window painting. Is it this weekend or next weekend?
Next week through
Next
FAN.
weekend? Yeah. Yep, so thank you, FAN, for that. Those always add color, as Mike's saying, a visible indication of how inclusive our community can be. So that's great to see, and I think Pride Fest is Tuesday, June 6th?
With a rain date of June 8th.
With a rain date of June 8th?
Not gonna need it.
Okay.
Tell Inca that.
Nora's just guaranteed no rain, that's videotaped. And I think you have an event that Friday night as well, up at the Griffin, so June 9th. So if you're available, we went last year, it was great on Town Common, it was a lot of fun, it was packed, took my kids, so should be another great amount of events, but this just kind of keeps it rolling for the whole month. And as Mike says, certainly it doesn't stop at the end of June, so something we just need to consider and always work and strive towards, so.
And thank you, Mr. Matthews, and those who work with you to get all these signatures, and thanks for the presentation.
Yep.
And thank you for those that edited this and put it all together. I know it took a committee, so thank you for that as well.
And I just to jump on Mike's point, which is, having this statement is really valuable in showing what our values are around inclusivity, and having these visual symbols is really important in showing pride flags and showing inclusivity and being really intentional around how we can message our values and sort of use this sort of imagery and symbolism and being able to be really clear about what we're thinking and how we're displaying pride flags and displaying other things just helps to show where we are and can be inclusive.
So if there's a motion, we could consider it.
I move that we log into my iPad faster. I move that we adopt the Pride Proclamation as posted in our agenda for May 22nd, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, it's unanimous.
I
Thank you for
just
that.
want to make a statement that the final document is ready for you to all sign tonight.
Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. We will do that at the conclusion of our meeting. Okay. moving along. The village license agreement. Beth, you wanna?
Sure. So, we are moving towards, construction on the last, town flood mitigation project, which is located, behind the Morocco School, near the transfer station. To be able to access that area, we need to cross property owned by the village, condominium in that area. And so our town council has drafted this temporary construction and access license agreement, which the condominium association trustees has signed. And if you are okay with it, you could authorize me to sign on the town's behalf.
Any questions on this? Any discussion?
I just have a question about where the work is.
So we're in design and permitting right now. The goal is to have the project ready to bid next February.
So if I'm in behind Morocco, and I'm looking where the railroad tracks are, where's the flood mitigation on the other side of that, or?
No, so right now, the river goes underneath the railroad culvert, right? It goes underneath the railroad viaduct, and there's an existing culvert, and so we'll be adding an additional culvert to expand the capacity.
Was it the third one? That we're adding?
There's two, well, yeah, there's one currently, so, yeah, I can't recall the specifics of the,
So that runs down into the river or stream next to the villages? Must
so,
right,
yeah,
is
so
that-
it goes, Morocco's on one side, the transfer station's on the other side.
Yep.
And the village actually owns the river in that section.
Nice, thank you.
Beth, do we see any cost increases for the project at this point and have to go back to town
Yeah,
meeting,
so we're
or-
evaluating that right now.
Okay.
Working with VHB, but it's possible maybe to go to fall town meeting
Yeah.
for that.
And this is probably in there, but it's for the duration of the work, right?
Correct.
So it's access, being able to disturb it.
Right.
Okay. So I don't see that there's an end date necessarily on this, but expires after, okay. 30 days notice anyway.
And so that's 3 years.
Yeah,
4 years.
I did.
The expiration says 3 years after the effective date.
Where's that? What
So,
Page
page
5.
5, section 8, under term.
The agreement shall expire 3 years after the effective date unless extended by agreement of the parties with 30 days' notice
Got it.
or early terminated pursuant to the terms of this agreement. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that we authorize the town manager to sign on the town's behalf the temporary construction and access license agreement for the villages.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Okay, next up, we have a state bill for technology funding. This is something that Dave Gothier had forwarded. I believe it's something that this board had signed in the past. It's now, Mike, you may know this better than anyone, if you remember, but it's now being refiled this legislative session, so they're looking for us to sign this again in support of WinCam. Any questions or discussion? Anyone have an issue signing this and sending it off?
No.
Is there a motion to authorize, I believe it's my signature?
I think you all are signing.
We're all
We're
signing?
all signing it. And
All
again,
signed.
that document's also ready for signature tonight after your approval.
Great.
I move that the board signs the letter for the state bill for technology funding to the Joint Committee on Advanced Information Technology, Internet, and Cybersecurity.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Last item on the business agenda is the Waterfield lot. So, the project is progressing. Obviously, it's a complex lot and a complex project. They're getting ready to submit their permitting set. However, there's a couple issues, I think, that still remain outstanding that we're still trying to resolve and work out. They're looking to extend the due diligence period to September 1st of 2023 to give the town and Civico enough time to resolve those issues as they go forward with the permitting process as well. It's most likely that they'll probably start the permitting process while these issues are outstanding and while the due diligence period continues. So we're making progress, which is great, but just, I think they're looking for some safeguards, should those issues not be able to be resolved. So I don't know if there's any discussion about extending this to September 1st, but, or any questions? Anyone have an issue with this? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that we amend the land development agreement to extend the due diligence period for Civico to September 1st from the Waterfield lot. And authorize the town manager to sign.
Important part, yeah. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Then we'll do our consent agenda, and then we'll go back up to the top.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as posted Monday, May 22nd, 2023.
All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes. Then moving back up to the top of the agenda, we have a couple of donations to accept.
Move that we accept with gratitude 2 ARPA stabilization grants to the Recreation Department, the May disbursement in the amount of $16,333.33 to be used for the Rap Kit connection, and the other in the amount of $5,416.67 to be used for the lunch after school program.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes. And the second one.
I move we accept with gratitude a donation of $500 for Realty Consultants and Anderson Group to the Recreation Department for expenditures at the Packer Ellis Tennis Courts.
A second, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike seconded.
I did,
Perfect.
I'm sorry.
You did.
I'm just mumbling at this point, I'm sorry.
Undercover.
There we go.
There we go.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes as well unanimously. Last but not least, Beth, if you want to go through your town
Sure,
manager's report?
yep. So first up, I have an appointment this evening. In accordance with Section 4-2B of the Town Charter, I've made the following regular full-time appointment in the Department of Public Works to Maintenance Special Equipment Operator of Derek Meany from Woburn, and I requested the board waive the 15-day appointment period.
Is there a motion?
Move that we waive the 15-day appointment period to appoint Derek Meany to the DPW Maintenance Special Equipment Operator.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes
Thank you.
unanimously.
And I just had a few updates, several of which are a repeat from last week. So as we mentioned last week, the Network for Social Justice is continuing their lived experience survey to understand occurrences of hate crimes and discriminatory, marginalizing, harassing, and exclusionary incidents. You can access that survey on the town's website or from their own website at the Network for Social Justice. The Jenks Center also has a survey ongoing to create the best experience for all residents aged 55 and older. You can access that survey on the town's website. As we've mentioned the last few meetings, there's currently a lottery, or will be a lottery going on for the new affordable housing units at 416 Cambridge Street, right across from Whole Foods, and the new 40B project on River Street. The application deadline for that is May 31st, so I would encourage anybody who's interested in that to please apply, and the lottery will be held on June 14th. We have a very busy construction season. Really nothing new to add from last week, but we will have Eversource is continuing their work on the 345 kV project on Cross Street. The work on Washington Street is complete. We have roof evaluations going on. We have some library and town hall window evaluations going on. And then we have a few projects that will be coming up this summer. The Lake Street Bridge project, which I know we've talked about at length, will be a substantial project which will result in the closure of the Lake Street Bridge sometime in early to mid-July. We'll have another project, a small project on Woodside Road for a Winter Pond water quality improvements. We have a project going on at the McCall School, masonry repair work. And then we'll have a larger roadway construction project at the corner of Woodside Road and Wildwood Street that will start right after school gets out.
Is there gonna be like a signboard up 2 weeks before we close the Lake Street Bridge to let people know?
Yeah,
about
so
that?
we're gonna it'll be a slow progression. We'll start with a National Grid being out there and doing some daytime lane restrictions, doing their work. And then we'll get people used to that, and then we'll transition to the full closure, yeah.
It took me an hour and a half to be home from Logan last night. I was like, what?
It'll be big signage that says the John Fallon Project on both sides of it, with your cell phone number.
Email John with any
Just you survived
complaints.
Sterling
Just
Drive.
say, we don't know, this
The
was all
Sumner
John's
Tunnel.
idea.
He's in
Take
charge.
the road closures with you.
I had a chance on Thursday to be up at the transfer station with with Nick and some of the engineers, just to understand the progress of the transfer station, because if you haven't noticed, the rubble hasn't really moved very far in the last couple of weeks. So I understand they hit a little bit of a snag in demoing that building, but it should be rectified in the next 7 to 10 days, and then hopefully once that's out of there, they'll begin the final paving and then the striping. I was just kind of trying to understand the flow of traffic, make sure that people had enough room to get to the belts, back up from the belts, and then, where those stop signs were gonna be. It's one thing to see it on paper, it's another thing to see it actually in practicality. I think, we've had some growing pains with the new recycling center, which is fantastic, but I think we're kind of working out those kinks. But when it's busy, it can still be problematic. But it's my understanding that they're thinking about, when the final striping happens, that the lane that's right now closest to those recycling bays it's going to be no parking at that point. And so they're gonna try on like a Saturday, maybe having 3 lanes available for people to drop off recycling, and then 1 kind of through lane. So it's a work in progress, but that's kind of the plans the engineers were talking about. So just wanted to update you all on that why, in case you get any questions about why the rubble hasn't really moved very far.
It's coming.
And it's kind of, hindering our ability to use the conveyor belt in that one stretch. So hopefully in the next 7 to 10 days, that will be taken care of, and that will be back open.
Yeah, and I wanted to note that the crosswalks went back in on Main Street. Yellow line's still missing, but after last week, when I mentioned.
Yeah, the crosswalks are just temporary because there
But
was.
It's certainly nice to see them
Yes.
back.
Yes.
So, thank you, whatever, temporary, they were needed.
Yeah.
So I want to note that. I went out and dropped a child, got coffee, and they weren't there, and then I went out at the end of the day and they were there. Like, literally in the space of, a morning. I was like, wait, when did that happen? So,
That's what I was gonna say, I ran through there this morning and
It was last Thursday,
I was
Wednesday or Thursday morning.
still crossing the street down on Bacon. It's not striped.
Like in field, yeah.
Any other questions for Beth on her report or anything?
Just a quick question on sorry, Anthea, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask if Cross Street there was discussion of paving last week, if that was.
So I think they're going to grind and do a first coat on Washington Street and then possibly Cross Street to like Marion, because there's still a lot of work to be done from Marion Street to the Woburn line. But I think that's the area that they're thinking about doing the first coat of pavement on.
Okay.
Yep. I don't have a timeline for that yet, though.
Do you have one?
The license plate reader process for the transfer station, when
Yeah, so we've had a couple meetings about that, and now that we have our new DPW director on board, we need to kind of regroup. There's a couple just kind of pieces in terms of which database we use, like parcels database, census database, kind of figuring out the logistics of how we'll start that up to hopefully roll it out for January 1st.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else? I think that's everything. Patty, did we miss anything?
No, you guys got everything, including authorizing Beth to sign everything.
Right, I made Patty write it down, so between the two of us, one of us remember.
I was gonna end all of my motions next week with and authorize the town manager to sign, even if it's not necessary.
Job to sign, yeah.
Relevant.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, WinCam. Good night, everyone. Thanks, Patty.